lot of work surrounding the election. We've called 4 million. We've contacted 4 million voters through phone banks and text banks and canvases, encouraging people to vote strategically against Donald Trump and for Kamala Harris, because Trump is our worst case scenario. The climate change movement, the climate crisis under Trump is going to be a disaster, and we need to choose the environment which we want to organize under. And frankly, as much as I don't like to say it, that is Kamala Harris's presidency if she wins.
And what are your with the election today? What did you see in terms of turnout by young people?
Here in Florida, the turnout has been very, very large on behalf of young people. Here at my own campus, on my college campus, there has been a 147% turnout from the amount of students that go to this college to the amount of people that actually turned out to vote.
We are lib watching, boys.
The vast majority of the people who go to school here have voted, and that is consistent across all of the major college campuses in the state of Florida.
Hello.
It's very consistent throughout the country. This election is decided by young people. We are the voice that is making this election possible.
Yeah. So.
And Kamala Harris
yeah.
without us.
Florida isn't doing great. Apparently, Florida just lost a bunch of stuff, like referendum to protect abortion rights failed.
To you.
Anti-climate referendum passed.
I do think that she had a lot of shortcomings when it came to her campaign reaching out to Gen Z, especially on an international level, as well as on the climate crisis. She has not addressed the climate crisis as much as we would like to, although we have had a few wins, such as her including the climate crisis into one of her plans earlier in the year. And in general, it's been a very mixed bag. And no matter what, we need to continue fighting once the election happens, because we don't trust Kamala Harris to listen to us about the climate crisis. We only fight for her because she's the environment we want to organize under, not because we want her particularly.
I respect this guy. I respect what he's saying. That's something Gabrielle Rockhill even was saying, was the same thing, was like, at least it's better to organize under that than it is to organize under Trump, but, whatever.
We only have a minute. We talked to you after...
But he's also recognizing that Kamala is also, like, a demon at the same time. Fair materialist analysis.
Hurricane Milton or Hurricane Helene, but how have the recovery efforts gone in Florida? And are people making the connection to climate change?
We've been very much emphasizing the connection. We went down and we had a protest right after Hurricane Helene, and then Hurricane Milton hit. And frankly, the hurricane relief efforts have been pretty successful in terms of getting people back on their feet. Lots of relief efforts are still going on at the moment. We're still distributing food. Lots of our partner organizations, such as Florida Student Power, are still holding food.
I actually almost worked for Sunrise Movement. Almost, as in I almost got an interview with them.
Like that. And in general, people have been making that connection. That connection is being very much reinforced in the state of Florida. And we're hoping to see that, if not now, then in the future.
Well, Manuel Ivan Guerrero, we want to thank you very much for being with us, and congratulations on voting for the first time in this election as an 18-year-old freshman at the University of Central Florida, a climate organizer with the Sunrise Movement. We'll be back.
Kid is pretty smart
with our
overall.
Election night special in a minute. We're continuing through midnight. This is War, Peace, and the Presidency. As we cover
going all the way to
latest
midnight,
news
huh?
at the top of the hour, we'll summarize everything we know.
Sunrise Movement is just like a climate advocacy organization. That's like the main reason, one of the main reasons I would vote for Kamala. I didn't, but Kamala's awful on the environment. She's pro-fracking, she's pro-oil, but Trump is going to be even worse.
Chicago, this is Democracy Now!
Okay, there's a break. I got a bunch of these tabs open. That's ads.
All about language and some.
And then here's also the live election map. There's like 5 or 6 of these things. How are third parties doing tonight? That's a good question. I don't know. I assume the only website that probably will actually talk about that is Democracy Now! Much. I do not know how the third parties are doing. I don't think they're doing great. Like, I don't think Jill Stein's even gonna get 5%. Oh, that's annoying. Alright, is this back?
From New York,
Hell yeah.
This is Democracy Now! This is War, Peace, and the Presidency. We're halfway through our 4-hour special. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh here in New York. It's 10 p.m. on the East Coast. Polls have closed in Montana, Nevada, and Utah. In Delaware, Democrat Sarah McBride has been elected the first openly transgender Congress member in U.S. history, defeating Republican John Whalen. She's vowed to address criminal justice reform, abortion rights, and gun violence, among other issues. In reproductive rights news, ballot measures protecting abortion access have passed in Maryland and New York. They failed in Florida. As the latest results are coming in, a review of the presidential race so far this evening, Donald Trump has won at least 188 electoral college votes to Harris's 99. So far, Trump has carried most of the Southeast, with North Carolina and Georgia still counting ballots. Kamala Harris has clinched most northeastern states and Illinois. Trump's also won the Dakotas, Nebraska.
Who's gonna win? I don't know. I have no fucking clue. Anyone who knows has no fucking clue. It's a toss-up. I've got no fucking clue. That's why I'm watching. I know as much as you guys about who's gonna win. Unbanned from my Discord? Message me if you want to get unbanned. Yeah, I'm Amy Goodman. Absolutely
Wyoming,
spitting.
Montana, Utah, Ohio, and Texas. Trump has also won Florida handily, where he lives, becoming the first Republican presidential candidate since 1988 to win Miami-Dade County. Decision Desk HQ.
Wow, he won Miami? He fucking won Miami? Oh my god, that fucking disgusting Gusano hellhole, dude. A fucking city going to Trump. That shows how fucking pathetic Miami is, dude. Just a fucking Gusano right-wing hellhole, dude. That's crazy. That's crazy.
Other news agencies have yet to call that race. In Maryland, Prince George's County Executive Angela Alsobrooks, a Democrat, defeated former Maryland Governor Larry Hogan in the Senate race, keeping the seat Democratic. We now go to Austin, Texas, where we are going to be joined by a Congress member, Congressmember Greg Casar. Donald Trump has won Texas, but the Senate race between Senator Ted Cruz and Congressmember Colin Allred for Cruz's Senate seat remains too close to call. Congressmember Greg Casar is a Democrat from Texas, whip of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, labor organizer.
I sort of agree that Americans have it coming. The problem is, the only thing is that, like, Trump will destroy the world more by making climate change even worse. I think that's the counter argument you could make, is that, like, Trump with climate change is just even worse than Kamala by a lot. So it's like, that's not just going to hurt Americans, that's going to hurt everyone everywhere. But yeah, I mean, I don't, you know, I don't fault anyone for not voting for Kill 'em all Kamala.
Of Mexican immigrants. Congressmember Casar, we welcome you back to Democracy Now! Can you talk about what's happened in your state? President Trump taking the state, but the Senate race, all eyes are on this Senate race between Allred and Cruz, still too close to call.
Thanks so much for having me on such a critical night. And for my entire lifetime, we haven't seen a Democratic president win Texas, but Texas keeps getting closer and closer every time. Texas isn't a red state or even a blue state. It's just an under-organized state where so many people are sick of politics, have checked out, and need to have their door knocked on, need a real person to talk to them and talk to them about how we can actually make a difference in their lives. And that's what so many on-the-ground organizers have been doing. And frankly, if there had been the investment from the National Democrats for the last 6 years, I think that Colin Allred would be ahead of Ted Cruz right now. But right now, the race is very close, with some of the voting results that I'm seeing having Colin a bit behind. But what I think is so important for the Texas story is that the vast majority of people in the state don't vote. Of registered voters, we have a majority that vote, but it's still not even a very great majority. And so I think that's part of what's important for folks to know about.
Yeah, Hassan has become somewhat of like a, not pro-Kamala, but definitely like uncomfortably pro-Kamala to an extent. It's like, man, they kicked him out of the DNC. Like, they don't give a fuck about him. They don't give a fuck about leftists. It's like, you should not be out here. You can say, like, do whatever you want, but don't fucking campaign for the Democrats when they disrespected you by kicking you out of the DNC, when Kamala has run a completely right-wing campaign that hasn't in any way appealed to the left at all. If Trump wins and tries to implement Project 25, what are the chances that the military coups him and implements a more progressive administration than anything Kamala would head? 0. I don't know why the U.S. military would put in place any sort of, progressive administration, and definitely not more progressive than Kamala. Yeah, I don't think that's going to happen.
Back at home.
I'll be right back.
Congressmember, could you explain why is that the case? Why is, as you say, Texas under-organized? And why don't so many people in Texas vote?
We're a big state, and unlike other battleground states, I talk about Texas as the biggest battleground state in the country. But unlike other battleground states, we do not have the level of organizing infrastructure. There's been a multi-decade-long campaign to crush labor unions and their power in this state. The Democratic Party oftentimes has treated Texas as an ATM to pull money out of rather than invest long-term organizing money into. And so I deeply appreciate the way that organizers and the Democratic Party have come together in states like Georgia, like Nevada, like Wisconsin, where there's multiple floors worth of organizers in most of the major metropolitan areas working to get out the vote. We just don't have that level of investment in Texas. And so when Ted Cruz didn't even get 51% of the vote 6 years ago, that's when we thought that the National Democratic Party would wake up and invest adequate resources in Texas. But we didn't see that. In the last couple of months, suddenly there's been interest again. That's put more wind behind Colin Allred's sails. He's been working really hard. Everybody's been working hard for him. But our hope is that after this election cycle, come what may, we finally start treating Texas just like the other battleground states. And I think that's what would make a real difference and have Republicans finally lose the state in the coming years.
And Congressmember, you've been going door to door, trying to get people out to vote. What are you hearing from voters in Texas, the places that you've been to? If you could just tell us about that.
From Texas to Nevada, all around the country where I've been, we hear so many voters being disillusioned with politics. And I think and hope that the vice president will win the presidential election. But even if she does win, it will be really close in a race that shouldn't have been close. And the Democratic Party's responsibility is to build a coalition that includes progressive voters and urban voters, but also brings rural voters back to the table, that brings together working class voters across geographic and racial lines. And if we're going to do that, then I think we need to form a Democratic Party that truly is for working people, that stands against the billionaire class that's funding Donald Trump. I'm sitting in Austin, Texas right now, where Elon Musk
The billionaire class is also funding Kamala Harris. Kamala Harris has many billionaire funders. So it's not like Kamala Harris is also very billionaire friendly. It's just two different kinds of billionaires. It's the fucking insane far-right Nazi billionaires like Elon Musk, and the literal or moderate conservative capitalist billionaires like Bill Gates. And I don't know about Jeff Bezos, but yeah, I mean, Kamala is also loved by the billionaires. Kamala is going to be great for billionaires. How much better is Kamala on climate change? I mean, if you think they are the same, like equally as bad, I don't know what to tell you.
has relocated most of the operations from Tesla. Also, right up the road here next to my district is Bastrop, Texas, where he's relocating Twitter, or what's now known as X. He and other billionaires are dumping money into right-wing politics, stripping away everyday Texans' rights, but most importantly, they're putting their hand in everyday Texans and everyday Americans' pocketbooks. And the Democratic Party needs to stand up against that kind of corporate greed, stand up against the coward politicians that enable that kind of corporate greed, and I think that kind of Democratic Party could get out voters in places like Texas who just currently on the economic issues don't have a clear picture of who is for them. And I think we need a Democratic Party that's clearly for working class people and middle class people. I've seen Joe Biden, I've seen Kamala Harris start heading more in that direction. That's really important, but we need to consolidate the entire Democratic message around being for working class voters across these ideological and geographic lines.
Right now, Reuters is reporting that Donald Trump is outperforming what he did in 2020. Congresswoman Passar, you're the whip of the Congressional Progressive Caucus. Can you explain? I mean, you have this Madison Square Garden rally where among the people who spoke, and President Trump went on after he called Puerto Rico a floating island of garbage, to call the event a love fest repeatedly. Just last night, after he talked about he's going to protect women.
Yeah, Kamala, that's how these fucking elections work. It's just pathetic. It's like she has to play to the Pennsylvanian fucking voters who want fracking because that's their jobs. So they don't give a shit about climate change when it comes to their own personal benefit. And that I get it, but fracking is horrific for the environment in the long term in numerous ways. It causes earthquakes. It poisons groundwater. It does all these horrific things. So I don't give a shit if the Democratic will in Pennsylvania is to have fracking. That's an example where democracy is bullshit because it's people who want their personal preference at the cost of a greater good. Yeah, I watched a little bit of BRG's stream, and then I was like, you know what, maybe I'll go live.
Women, whether they want it or not. In the last week, he called for Liz Cheney, a fellow Republican, the former Republican from Wyoming, to be shot in the face. And last night, he called Nancy Pelosi the B word. Can you explain how it is that he is outperforming?
Pumped lies and propaganda constantly out into the American public. And the question is, how can we beat back those sorts of lies? And I think the only way to beat back lies is with truth. I think the only way to beat back the kind of authoritarian message that Trump and Trumpism pumps out there is with more democracy. And if we want to beat that back, then I think progressives need to make sure that the progressive movement is principled, but also populist. I think we need to go directly at some of these billionaire and corporate interests and make clear who the villains in the story really are. Because Donald Trump has been telling his version of the story. He knows that people are feeling stress. People are feeling anxiety. And Donald Trump has said that the villains are immigrants, or the villains are the LGBTQ community. The villains are Democratic politicians that put immigrants above everybody else. That's the false story that Donald Trump has been telling consistently on the campaign trail since 2016. Democrats need to have a compelling and populist and popular message in response. That the villains aren't the immigrant communities. The villains aren't your own neighbors. The villains and the people that are making that stress and strain are Wall Street. It is the special interest lobby. It is the corporate greed that is driving up prices for people and the politicians that are allowing that to happen. I don't think the Democratic Party has had that solid of a message to keep working class voters fully within the coalition.
Dude, Greg Cesar, you're naive, my friend. I respect you. You seem like a nice guy, but you're very naive. If you think there's a very good reason the Democrat Party does not lean into a populist message. The reason is that the Democratic Party is a capitalist party, a hyper-capitalist party. It is a right-wing capitalist party. It has left elements, but the party itself, there's a reason it's funded by billionaires, you know? And then when you had someone like Bernie Sanders try to run, he got sabotaged. Everyone else, every other Democrat candidate combined, even Elizabeth Warren, that fucking snake, who was like the semi-progressive, even she thought that the social democrat Bernie Sanders was too much. So, yeah, we're fucked. The Democrats are fucking garbage. And that's just how it is. Dude, FDR not picking Henry Wallace in 1944 as his vice president was one of the greatest untold catastrophes of all time.
Used to have in years past. And so I still believe and hope that President Harris will win both the popular vote and the Electoral College. But if we want to be able to beat not just Donald Trump, but Trumpism, then I think we need to forge a Democratic Party that is popular amongst a broad swath of the American public. And that means rallying people around an economic message that everyday Americans should be able to afford a decent life while working a dignified job and having a secure retirement. And that we're going to stand up to a Republican Party that just talks like they're for workers, but really they're out there attacking people's basic rights and giving tax breaks out to billionaires. So in this coming Congress, come what may in this election, I think it's going to be so critical for principled progressives to take popular stands. Say we're not going to extend the Trump tax scam that gives away so many of our tax dollars to the top 1% and big corporations while leaving middle-class families holding the bag. I think that that's the kind of fight that progressives...
Henry Wallace would have been JFK'd though. I mean, let's be honest, he would have been. There's like, it would be extremely unlikely that he would have lasted, because they were already gonna coup FDR, the business plot. They were gonna coup FDR, and then they happened to find a general who was a fan of FDR who exposed it. But like, yeah, there would have been a definite coup attempt on Henry Wallace. But that's alternate history anyways, so.
Need to take on so that we bring the vast majority of Americans back together around a pro-democracy and a pro-worker agenda.
Congressmember Greg Casar, I want to thank you for being with us. Democrat from Texas, whip of the Congressional Progressive Caucus, labor organizer, and son of Mexican immigrants. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org. This is War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. As we turn now to Washington, D.C., to the campus of the historically black college, Howard University, where Kamala Harris is holding her watch party. It's her alma mater. We're joined now by Eugene Daniels, Politico's White House correspondent, with a special focus on Kamala Harris. He's also the co-host of The Playbook. Eugene Daniels is president of the White House Correspondents Association. You're at the watch party, Eugene. What is the sense of what's happening right now?
Yeah, Amy, happy to be with you. You know, the watch party, the people who are excited, they are outside on the Yard, which is this kind of very popular and famous landmark at Howard. They're watching the returns as they're coming in, and they kind of don't know what to make of them, right? I think they, just like a lot of Americans, were hoping to have early answers, but like we all know, that was never going to be the case. They're looking at North Carolina, and and other folks, starting to call it for Donald Trump, even though it's too early to call for the Associated Press. Same thing in Georgia, but they're feeling good about the blue wall states. And when you talk to the folks on the campaign, they're saying the same thing. The exit polls showed one thing, but exit polls often get changed. So we're still in a very much wait and see how this election turns out phase.
And if you could say, Eugene Daniels, you wrote a piece last month titled Inside Harris's Black Men Blitz. Can you talk about how Harris has appealed to this demographic and why this was so significant in this election?
Yeah, one thing that's been really interesting for decades, black men have soured on the Democratic Party. It's not a Kamala Harris created problem, but it was as a candidate, her responsibility to try to fix as much as she possibly can. And what she started to do was she had this black man agenda, right, where said they would offer small business loans of up to $20,000 that would be forgivable, a focus on the issues of health that affect black men disproportionately. And what you heard from inside the campaign...
You too, black people, can be capitalists to exploit other people. Ugh, God. Ugh, it's just depressing.
Democrats outside that have just looked at this issue and black men and how you convince them to come back to the Democratic Party is that black men have felt like there's these conversations that are happening about a lot of different constituency groups, and they feel left out of that process. And even when there is something that the Democrats have done for black men, they don't always sing it from the rooftops the same way that they do when it's an LGBTQ plus issue, or for these men, a women, a quote unquote women's issue, right? And so it's about messaging, it's about a focus, and we will see, the exit polls are showing that Donald Trump did a lot better in Wisconsin, for example, with black men. We'll have to keep watching those returns, but Harris and her team kind of did a full blitz, right? They went and talked to people like Charlamagne the God, who is a very influential radio host in the black community. She was on the radio today with Big Figure.
I do not understand why Kamala Harris didn't go on Joe Rogan. I mean, she is like a galactically bad politician when it comes to running for office, in just like every way. Like, why would you not go, especially when Kamala is already doing a right-wing appeal? Joe Rogan's like a center-right guy. I think the Trump interview got like 50 million views or something. It's like, but then Kamala wouldn't interview Joe Rogan because she wanted Joe Rogan to come to her. No, you dumb psychopath! You go to Joe Rogan. Joe Rogan is the biggest freaking podcaster in the world. She is huge. Like, it boggles the mind. And I wonder, I have to believe that she was just terrified to be pressed in any way. Like, that's the main thing I could possibly think. Because I just don't understand. Yeah, she wouldn't be able to sustain any amount of interest on a podcast for more than like 10 minutes. I mean, she's gone on podcasts though. They just said she went on Charlemagne. She's gone on these talk shows and stuff, but like she didn't choose the most popular one in like in the fucking world. It's like it's wild to me.
There were all these different aspects of it where they were looking to make sure that black men came home, and the way that she treated them, according to her campaign, was as a persuadable group, not just a voting bloc that was going to automatically vote for her.
You were one of the 3 journalists at the National Association of Black Journalists, NABJ, questioning of Kamala Harris. I'm wondering if you can, I want to go to that sound on tape, as it's called in the business, when you asked her a question.
Is there a specific policy change that you, as President of the United States, would say you would do that would help this along? Because you've gotten a lot of credit for emphasizing the humanity of Palestinians. But what I often hear from folks is that there's no policy change that either you or President Biden have gone and said they would do. Is there a specific policy change as president that you would do in our helping of Israel?
We need to get this deal done. And we need to get it done immediately. And that is my position, and that is my policy. We need to get this deal done.
But in the way that we send weapons, in the way that we interact as their ally, are there specific policy changes?
Well, Eugene, for example, one of the things that we have done that I'm entirely supportive of is the pause that we put on the 2,000-pound bombs. And so there is some leverage that we have had and used. But ultimately, the thing that is going to unlock everything else in that region is getting this deal done.
Your response, Eugene Daniels, to her answer.
Yeah, I mean, in the moment, I kept trying to get her to reveal something, right? And what was very clear to me, sometimes when you're interviewing a politician, sometimes kind of a non-answer is their answer, right? And you have to focus, you have to kind of take it for what it's worth. What her aides say and what folks in the White House and on the campaign will tell you is that, you know, she is trying to make sure that she wasn't messing up the deal, the possible deal for hostages being freed in a ceasefire. And you know, Israel and Hamas were looking for kind of any indication that the administration was waffling. But at the same time, when you talk to voters, they wanted to hear something different. They wanted to hear something specific, right? Me and my colleague Holly Otterbein last year in November wrote a story about the kinds of things that Vice President Harris was saying behind closed doors to President Biden. One, that he needed to be tougher on Benjamin Netanyahu, and 2, that he needed to speak differently about the plight of the Palestinians. He changed one, not really the other. And so we know that
that is just stupid. That is just such made up bullshit. Because everything Kamala said has been pretty much exactly in line with Joe Biden. And she even said that, like, when she was asked, like, what she would change from Joe Biden, she straight up said that, like, she would change nothing. So that is just such a nonsense statement to make. That is so silly. Thank you, Wesleyan 134. Much appreciated. Hold on the alert box. The chat box, I'll put that. That makes it unreadable. Whatever. Thank you. I voted for the PSL candidate on my main-in ballot. Respect. I'd say in terms of mail-in ballot, yeah. I'd say in terms of the best ticket, I'd probably say PSL was the best ticket, but PSL or Green, they both said to vote for each other, which I really respected that they did that. So, yeah. Let me put the chat there, I guess.
Has these views, but as a candidate, she has struggled with what a lot of vice presidents struggle with, which is distinguishing yourself without distancing.
Another good reason to actually go and vote is the local elections. The local referendums, the local elections, those are things, especially referendums, because that is like where your vote is directly going towards.
Yourself too much from the man whose office you have to walk into the next day, and that has been kind of the needle that she's threading. And we will see whether or not young people, black voters, and obviously Arab American voters in this country didn't like her answer so much to not vote for her in some of these key battlegrounds. But that is the message that you heard from folks. They liked the way that she spoke, they liked the rhetoric, but they didn't hear any policy changes, and they weren't voting for rhetoric. They wanted to see something different.
And do you think, I mean, Eugene, if you can say what is the sense in the room? I mean, it was expected that Republican votes would be counted more at the beginning. We were just talking with Robert Reich, the former labor secretary, more voting in person, and those are the votes that get counted first. But at this point in the evening, at 10:19 Eastern time.
Yeah, the abortion rights protection failed in Florida, the referendum.
Is this still the feeling
Yeah, it is. It still is a feeling. It depends on who you talk to. A lot of Democrats have been describing it as nauseously optimistic. They still feel that way. But I will also say, and it's unclear if that's because the Wi-Fi is not great here in the filing room or they're concerned. I am hearing from less of my sources who are usually talkative, right? And so what that says is either they are worried about some of these numbers that they're seeing coming in, or they're digging into the numbers to see what's actually there to kind of figure out what they're going to see, how they're going to spin it, and where we're at, right? I think there are a lot of Democrats who think at this point her best lane here is the blue wall states, Nebraska too, and maybe Nevada, right? That is where a lot of their focus has been at this point. I think they woke up with this excitement that maybe North Carolina was on the table and they could actually win it, and it worked out really well for them. But that seems like a far-fetched dream at this point. But they are still optimistic, but they are definitely leaning into the idea that they feel like we're not going to know tonight. The Harris campaign, they're saying buckle in. They had a couple of days where they felt like we might have an answer tonight, but they're feeling like it's going to be a few days before they have a 270 call for either Donald Trump or Kamala Harris.
Okay, so Trump won Ohio. He's winning in North Carolina. Yeah, the South is all locked in. Kamala's winning in Michigan, but it's barely counted. And she's winning in Arizona and New Mexico, but those aren't really done counting. Nevada hasn't even started. Wisconsin is... Okay, so that's a big one. Wisconsin. Iowa, Kamala seems to be getting cooked in Iowa, and there was that Iowa poll that apparently was saying, like... There was that Iowa poll that was apparently saying... that Kamala was way up in Iowa, but it looks like, at least so far, that that's not translating into the election. Yeah, I have the video. Is the video going too fast, or is it fine as it is? I tend to watch videos fast like that. Don't you think that the left party should unite? I mean, yeah, but I think that's sort of what they did. I think they should. I mean, I think in like 2028 or whatever, I think they should unite under one ticket. PSL. I think CPUSA needs to be cooed, and actual leftists put in CPUSA. I don't mean that violently or anything. I'm just joking, but like. I think if every left party united to vote for one person, they could at least get that 5%. They could definitely get the 5%. They could break through that 5% at least, if nothing else. But yeah, I think it's looking pretty pessimistic for Kamala, I would say. Because, okay, oh wow, Georgia's close, but Kamala's behind. So we'll see there. So yeah, like all the states that Kamala needs to win, she's behind in. Wisconsin, Georgia, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, of course, I don't know how I missed that. So she's trailing in all of those big swing states. So we'll see.
Well, Eugene Daniels, we want to thank you for being with us. I'm sorry we couldn't see you, but that's the problem when the internet isn't quite working right where you are. Eugene Daniels is Politico's White House correspondent with a special focus on Kamala Harris, co-host of The Playbook, president of the White House Correspondents Association. Speaking to us from Howard University, the alma mater of Kamala Harris, where she is holding her watch party tonight. This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org.
I mean, I respect the CPUSA because they have a long history. They were the party in like the 20s and 30s, and they did a lot of good stuff and all that. And, yeah, what could have been, I guess. But yeah, I've heard it's kind of bad now, CPUSA.
peace in the presidency. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. We turn now to the battleground state of Phoenix, Arizona. We're joined by Marissa Franco, director and co-founder of Mi Gente, a national digital organizing hub for Latinx and Chicanx communities. And we also want to report this just in. NBC News is projecting Republican Senator Ted Cruz has won re-election to the U.S. Senate in Texas, beating out Congressmember Colin Allred. While you are, Marissa, in Phoenix, Arizona, if you can respond to this latest news of this major victory for Ted Cruz in Texas.
I think we'll have to examine the numbers. I mean, we've known for a long time there's a gap in Texas. There's a big gap between Democrats and Republicans, and just a huge amount of people that are not registered to vote. So I think that we'll be able to really glean the successes and failures of the campaign and where we're at in Texas. I think Texas has the potential to be an extremely strategic and impactful state, a state where demographic change is happening, just not yet. And so I think that in analyzing the numbers as the dust settles on the race, we'll be able to really be able to tell where we're at.
And if you could explain, go ahead, Marissa, go ahead.
But it sucks. Ted Cruz is absolute trash. So there's that.
And if you could, we're talking to you in Phoenix, Arizona, Marissa. If you could talk about what the situation there is, what results you've seen coming in now, however tentative, and about the propositions that are on the ballot this year, starting with Proposition 314. If you could explain what that is.
Well, so far there's been over 2.2 million votes cast by mail. It's a state where a vast amount of people vote by mail, so we should be getting results, but we don't really know yet. There has been a slew of ballot initiatives, including Proposition 314, which is sort of a combination between Arizona's SB 1070, Arizona's anti-immigrant law over a decade ago, and SB 4, which is one of the more recent anti-immigrant laws coming out of Texas by Governor Abbott. So it's a really nasty combination of the two. There's also Proposition 139, taking on the abortion ban, which I think a lot of us are looking at, and we hope that will succeed. And then the race for Senate with Ruben Gallego looks positive, but it has felt like the race at the top of the ticket, and like many other states across the country, it's razor thin, and it's going to be a coin flip. So it's still...
Marissa, the latest numbers we have on that, Congressmember Gallego, 53%, Lake, 45%, with 48% reporting, almost half reporting. If you can talk about what were the major issues in this race, and talk about what...
Dude, I feel so bad for this lady on the right. She looks like a freaking nervous... She looks like her nerves have just been completely broken. Like, and I don't blame her. Like, oh my God. Imagine, like, trying to organize against Ted Cruz and losing an election to Ted Cruz. It must feel, like, just miserable.
Could be, although it's too early to say, the significance of a Gallego victory.
That's tracking the polling. Gallego was polling higher than Harris in the state. So my sense is that will likely hold, especially the early vote had actually a big chunk of GOP voters and independent voters. It was actually more than Democrats. So that looks very, very promising.
Thank you for joining. Number of votes to win or number of states to win? It's number of states, because America is completely brain dead. It's just like, yeah, I mean, the Electoral College is just a complete joke. Not that I don't think American democracy would be that much better without an Electoral College, but it would definitely be better than it is now. A lot better.
For Senator Gallegos, I think that where it's a departure from Kyrsten Sinema. I think it will remain to be seen how much of an advocate and an ally Senator, if he is Senator Gallegos, will be. But nevertheless, it's a bright spot considering what we're facing in the federal landscape with respect to control of Congress. It's one of the seats that needed to be won, and I hope that we're able to deliver that here in Arizona.
And Marissa, if you could say about Proposition 139 on abortion, if you could say what precisely that measure is and where you see it going, why it's so important in Arizona.
Well, Arizona was one of the states that banned abortion following the Supreme Court decision. So this was an effort by advocates, women here in the state, like many other states, to try to actually create an amendment in the Constitution, in the state Constitution, to protect the right to an abortion. It has been one of the campaigns that has catalyzed and has drawn in many, many people. And I think it's important to just say, we're looking at a very close race. There's some of us who have been through this before. It's a nauseous optimism. There's so many people that are joining and doing political work for the first time. And so I think that it's important to honor that.
the work that people have done. And that certainly has been a campaign that has drawn thousands of women across Arizona who have been alarmed at the actions taken at the state legislature.
There are 10 states that have abortion referendum in this election. Florida has gone down. It actually won a majority of the vote, but not the supermajority that was needed, that was imposed on a ballot initiative passing in Florida. And New York, the #1 initiative, has passed. So that's very significant in Arizona. And I wanted to go back to what I believe is the only amendment around immigration in the country. And if you can talk more specifically about that initiative, the proposition that involves criminal
TYT, the Young Turks. I do not watch the Young Turks at all. I don't know. Oh, let's check out Vosh.
GA called. Who is called Georgia?
Okay, if there's any reason I want Kamala to lose, it's to watch Vosh coping about Kamala losing. That's actually pretty funny.
Rely on them? Didn't we say we're going to stick to using the AP News call? Didn't we say that? I remember saying that. Anyone who claims North Carolina or Georgia is called at this point is lying to you. They might be correct in their presumption, but they were not justified.
No, that's enough. I prefer to just stick to Democracy Now! For the most part. I mean, the Young Turks, aren't they like just straight up like liberals at this point? Schenk is a liberal and Anna Kasparian is like basically like a right-winger. And then Majority Report, I wonder if they're live. Majority Report is, yeah, they're live too. They're just a bunch of like
Pennsylvania
liberals, basically.
in Georgia.
Yeah, I don't think they have much of anything interesting to offer. And yes, by the way, Majority Report are liberals. Emma Vigeland is an admitted liberal. She is a friend with Vosh. Emma Vigeland of Sam Cedar. Sam Cedar himself has multiple times defended American foreign policy, defended the destruction of Libya, said the State Department should get more funding for its wars. On top of that, he is an incredible charisma void. He just is. I tried to watch Sam Cedar a little bit back in the day, and he is just so boring to watch. But on top of that, he's a total liberal, Sam Cedar. He's like a left liberal. And people don't realize... I just don't know why people don't realize that. Because he said these things that are blatantly, like, not like what a leftist would ever say. So, yeah. Democracy Now! At least has actual leftist credentials. So if you want to watch something that is at least fairly leftist, don't watch the Majority Report. Watch Democracy Now! And don't watch the Young Turks.
In a sec. Let's go to Pennsylvania.
Yeah, so Pennsylvania's at 57. They're all toss-ups currently at this point, but he's...
Yeah, I'm ignoring my own advice. Back to Democracy Now! Thank you, Wesley M, for another $10. Appreciate it. I mean, I don't think Sam Cedar's the worst guy ever. I just think he's a liberal, a left liberal, and and leftists seem to like him a lot, and it doesn't really line up with his political beliefs. The thing you really have to understand about fascists is that they are ultimately a bunch of cowards LARPing as tough men. They collapse the moment someone fights back against them. So they're ultimately a bunch of cowards LARPing as tough men. Yeah, I mean, that is reactionaries in a nutshell. They are the biggest children. They are fucking children. They are whiny, little, petulant, entitled children. You see this with the Gusanos. You saw this with the... I mean, that's just who they are. You see this with the dissidents. They are just... Ugh. Yeah, I mean, it's a tragedy that Michael Brooks was the one that had to pass away. Not that I'm saying Sam Cedar should pass away, but like, of everyone on the Majority Report, Michael Brooks was the one guy who was like actually a leftist. Yeah, Sem tried to run for president. Kyle Klinsky was the guy I grew up watching politics at first for like a couple years. He's like fully on the Kamala train. I mean, but generally, of all the SOC Dems and the left liberals, Kyle Klinsky is like the least bad, I'd say. I watched a little bit of the Humanist Report. He seems alright, I guess. Pretty cool.
People who are crossing the Arizona-Mexico border without authorization and allowing local law enforcement to arrest and deport migrants.
It's devolving what has been a civil federal issue. It's continuing the trend that Arizona in many ways started, overriding something that is federal to the state level, actually empowering the states to enforce federal immigration law by making it a state law. It is a new Jim Crow in many ways, where legislatures, governors are and different advocates are creating more and more ways to come after immigrants and to be able to embolden state officials and local law enforcement to enforce federal immigration law. It's unfortunate. I think that there has been I think that it's been a difficult time on immigration, the discourse.
So Jamie got ran off the show. I think I know who Jamie was. Was she the black-haired girl on the Majority Report? I never liked her either. The little I saw of her, I didn't really like her. She got kicked off for being an anarchist?
At the top of the presidential race has not necessarily shown real contrast, and so likely this, I haven't seen recent polling on this particular initiative, but very likely it's going to go to the courts. But this is just a continued trend of governors and state legislatures taking immigration enforcement into their own hands in the absence of any action at the federal level. And we continue to posit that it is almost 40 years since there has been legalization in this country, and this country would not run without the efforts, labor, and contributions of immigrant people. And it's about time that there be respect and dignity for the people who live, work, and are part of our communities. So this initiative, like Arizona has often done, the way that we're seeing in Texas is taking us in the wrong direction. And we'll have, I think, an ongoing fight on our hands following the outcome of the election. And back on the abortion measure, the ballot measure, it's leading 63.2% with more than 1 million votes. And no is 36.8 at 635,000. So this is very significant. AP is reporting that the abortion ballot measure that so many worked for so long to get on the Arizona ballot is at this point 63 to 36. It does look like it's going to pass, Marissa. It's great news. And I think it's potentially foreshadowing. We shouldn't have to be fighting for these basic rights in 2024. And that is, I think, the threat and has been a threat of a Trump presidency and the ongoing MAGA movement. And when I think about what happens in this election, and I think of Latinos in my home state of Arizona, my hope is that we remember that this is a state that in many ways foreshadowed MAGA. This was a state that took on looking to abolish ethnic studies, that took on to take away voting rights, that banned abortion. I hope that we remember that. And beyond that, I hope that we actually project that the status quo, middle of the road, like we can beat the likes of Kerry Lake, but we don't just have to go middle of the road, which I think a lot of people are tired of status quo policies that aren't actually making relevant impact in our lives. And so I think it's while it is a huge victory, and it's also labor that we shouldn't have to be doing in 2024, and thus that's a situation we're facing. But nevertheless, it's a victory, and my hat goes off to the folks that work so hard. It clearly was an issue that is unpopular here and across the country. Well, Marissa Franco, we want to thank you so much for being with us, director and co-founder of Mejente, that national digital organizing hub for Latinx and Chicanx communities. This is Democracy Now!, and we are more than halfway through our 4-hour special on this election night, this historic election, and we'll be summarizing for you everything we know as we go along the way, from the presidential race to congressional and Senate races, the balance of the Senate and the House.
Wow, they're
and also
neck
we'll
and
be talking
neck in
about
Arizona.
ballot initiatives, like we're talking about the ones around abortion. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. The latest news out of Delaware, Democrat Sarah McBride has been elected the first openly transgender Congress member in U.S. history, defeating Republican John Whalen. She's vowed to address criminal justice, reform, abortion rights, gun violence, and more. We're now joined by Amara Jones, who is the founder and CEO of Translash Media and host of its investigative podcast, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine. Her new piece for Newsweek is headlined, What's at Stake for Trans People in This Election? Welcome back to Democracy Now! It's great to have you with us, Amara. Start off with this Sarah McBride making history
victory, winning the congressional seat, the only congressional seat in Delaware.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on during this marathon tonight. Look, I think that Sarah made history and shows quite clearly that candidates matter. I think that we have to remember that aside from being a trans candidate, that Sarah made history as the first trans person to ever address a major political convention. Additionally, Sarah is just a terrific political talent in her own right. Made history as the first trans state senator from anywhere in the United States, and is now making history again tonight. Very close ties to the Biden family, understands the issues in her state, worked for Beau Biden, and so I think that not only is Sarah a great political talent.
I mean, this is how the American empire works, where the first innovators are people who are just completely establishment. Like, the people that break the boundaries are the most milquetoast liberals or conservatives. I mean, maybe Sarah McBride is a progressive, let's see. Because if she's closely associated with Joe Biden, then there's not much. I don't know where to look up someone's like voting record or whatever, but I don't know. I'm just skeptical of identity politics, where it's like, oh, a trans person got elected. I mean, that's nice and all, but again, it's like I don't know.
Said, storied in politics, but also is attached to a really powerful political family for all the right reasons. So I think, again, candidates matter, and that's what we saw tonight. And it was well fought and well earned.
And so, Imara, you've been sitting with us as we've been reporting. If you could respond to the results that have come in so far, and whether you're surprised at how, at least at the moment, it appears that the race is extremely close.
I mean, my prediction to anyone who would listen all year was that it was going to be a very tight race, that Vice President Harris could very well eke it out, but it would be eking it out. So I think that the races gone back to where I always thought that it was going to be, and I think we're having the race that was always predicted. And so I've gotten very nervous emails and texts throughout the night. I was happy to hear from Eugene, who is on the ground, who mentioned that some of his sources are going silent. But I think that it's because people are probably digging into the numbers, because it's going to be very tight. So we may not know tonight, and we may not know for a couple of days. And so I think we just have to steel ourselves for that. So I'm not surprised. And look, I think that one of the things that when I was on recently is I mentioned that the way that anti-trans issues are deployed is in tight races. And so this lens.
I mean, like, who was the first Prime Minister of England? One female Prime Minister of England, Margaret Thatcher. Margaret fucking Thatcher. Who was the first black Supreme Court Justice? It was like Thurgood Marshall, who was like a centrist. The first woman Supreme Court Justice, I forget her name. She was a conservative. So you appoint these people to positions of power, but they're never like actually arbiters of any political change or advancement. They're totally part of the establishment. Like that trans politician, closely associated with the Biden family, and she says that like that's a good thing. So she's totally in with the Democratic establishment status quo. Except maybe for trans rights, So, like, yeah.
Credence to why they were deploying anti-trans issues, because they read the same poll numbers.
And what's at stake for the transgender community? What do you think the most important issues are?
I mean, I think that what makes this different, I wish that we could talk about, what happens to trans healthcare or trans housing or trans, overall healthcare issues, like, for any other standard group of people in the United States. But I really do think that in this race, the issues for trans people are existential. I mean, there is a candidate in the race, Donald Trump, who, as a part of his closing argument last night, launched into an anti-trans screed. They also dropped a new ad today attacking Aman Khalif for being trans and participating in the Olympics. There's new ad dollar assessments that showed that they've spent north of $100 million on these ads over the past month. And so I think that, we are teeing up trans people to be one of the major targets in the trans administration. And for him, a part of the group that he's identified
the trans administration
or implied would be a part of his day one purge.
I mean, the amount, I don't know if people understand the tens of millions of dollars that were poured into ads. I mean, you'd see them in the middle of football games. You'd see them in baseball games. I want to turn to an ad that the Trump campaign ran, the first ever presidential campaign ad on the topic, and the Senate Leadership Fund, backed by Mitch McConnell, running ads in key Senate races, swing states during major football games.
Kamala was the first to help pay for a prisoner's sex change. The power that I had, I used it in a way that was about pushing for the movement, frankly, and the agenda. Kamala's agenda is they, them, not you.
But Brown voted multiple times to allow transgender biological males to participate in girls' sports.
Baldwin supported providing puberty blockers and sex change surgeries to minor children. She even supports forcing Wisconsin women's domestic violence shelters to admit biological men who claim to identify as women.
So how did the Democrats respond to these attacks? And where does that leave you? Where does it leave humanity after this election?
Well, the Democrats responded, as I have characterized it, most charitably as cautiously and in a measured way, right? First of all, they didn't respond to the ads at all. There was no set of ads that they could have run, for instance, with trans kids in them, showing the humanity of those families and how those families are being targeted. There are lots of ways, that you can respond that hold up to your values, but also try to appeal to people who may not necessarily be on your side, and politicians know how to do that. Moreover,
Yeah, I mean, Kamala pretty much straight up said that she would leave trans rights up to the states. Like, that's basically what she said. She said she'd follow the law. So yeah, I mean, Kamala is not gonna save you as a trans person. She's gonna, if you are in a red state as a trans person, Kamala is not gonna change anything about that. So yeah.
They had over a year to prepare for these attacks. I mean, everyone knew that there was going to be a certain point where this was going to be the focus. So there wasn't really a response on the ads. And then in the comments by the vice president, she was measured in what she said. And so there hasn't really been a full-throated or politically focused response from the Democrats. And I think that it's because they made a bid for the Haley voter as a way to try to get them over kind of the 48-49 hump to 50.
I like her outfit. I like her hair. It's a good outfit.
+1. And they know that those voters who supported Ambassador Haley are not pro-trans because Ambassador Haley herself made being anti-trans a key argument for her campaign. It was in her first speech out of the gate. It was in her stump speech everywhere. And so I think that they thought that in order to appeal to those voters that they had to be more careful than I actually think that the vice president is herself personally. I mean, she's gotten up in front of juries and argued for and about the humanity of trans people in some very focused ways. So I think that this is something that she knows how to do. I think that there was just some reticence given who they decided to target to get them over the hump.
Imara Jones, I want to thank you very much for coming in here today. What are you looking at as we wrap up as the way forward? And what will you be advising politicians? Will you be running yourself? I mean, you actually came out of the Clinton White House.
Yeah, no, the answer is no. Once you cross into journalism, that's it. So that's too late. I think where I am looking forward in terms of what comes next, Amy, is kind of where you ended your last question, which is what does this mean? I think the fact that we have had it looks like north of $100 million worth of ads dropped against trans people means that the atmosphere may have soured in a way that means that there's a lot of work to do, and that by not actually coming up with ways to respond that center the humanity of trans people, that there's actually been a large political opening that's been created through which authoritarians and extremists are driving a truck. And I think that vulnerability has only been exposed, and that danger has only been heightened by this campaign. And so
I just hate that the insults people use are authoritarians. Call them reactionaries. Authoritarian is such a dumb word to use.
The danger for trans people and the danger for democracy that's being exploited by people who are anti-democratic using trans people, that's not going anywhere tonight, and these results will not give anyone comfort, even if, as I've said, Vice President Harris ekes it out tonight.
I want to thank you so much for being with us, Amara Jones, founder and CEO of Translash Media. Check out the podcast, The Anti-Trans Hate Machine. Amara's new piece for Newsweek is headlined, What's at Stake for Trans People in This Election? This is Democracy Now!, democracynow.org, War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh.
We turn now to the battleground state of Michigan, where the presidential race is too close to call. With 25% of votes counted, Donald Trump has a narrow lead. We're joined now in Dearborn, Michigan, by Linda Sarsour, a Palestinian-American Muslim organizer, author of We Are Not Here to Be Bystanders, and co-founder of Empower Action Fund. Welcome back to Democracy Now!, Linda Sarsour. If you could describe the scene there in Dearborn, you've been at an election party with other Arab Americans. What are you hearing?
I am here at a wonderful Dearborn establishment called The Canteen, which is hosting a watch party. There are dozens of Arab American and Muslim American organizers that are here. You know, it's hard to tell where people are. People are watching the results coming in. It seems so far, at least as of now, that Donald Trump is leading in this election. Obviously, Michigan has not fully reported their numbers. So that, of course, is the most concern to the people that are here to see what happens in the state of Michigan.
I just want to let people know the latest news. Despite the fact that the very well-respected Des Moines Register poll indicated that Kamala Harris was up 3 points, it looks like President Trump has trumped Harris in Iowa and has won the state of
Wow.
Iowa. Also,
people were yapping about that poll, about how that poll must have meant that Trump won the that Kamala was going to win in Iowa. But apparently that was like a bunch of nothing. Wow. I'm not familiar with that thesis by Paul Cockshott. If you want, you can share it in chat or in the Discord. Because I've been meaning to look into Paul Cockshott a little bit more because a lot of people recommend him. Even though I believe he is a transphobe, so I'm not that interested. But maybe he has good contributions. I don't know. Send it in the Discord.
just to let people know, you have the abortion initiative that looks like it has
Florida
passed in
amendment
Arizona.
to legalize recreational marijuana fails. Like, how? How is that possible? How the fuck? Florida is like fucking Nazi Germany 2.0, dude. How the fuck? That's insane, dude. That is insane. Oh my god. And it's not like the government decided to keep marijuana legal. It was a referendum. It was literally an electoral vote. And the people voted for marijuana to stay illegal. Oh my god, man. Oh my god, dude. I need to just move to Cuba. I don't even care if it's not, you know, if it has a lot of issues right now. I just don't care. I need...
Well, it is also passed in New York. It has gone down, a different abortion initiative, but gone down in Florida. And Colorado has just voted to enshrine abortion rights. Just some of the latest news as we go through this 4-hour special. So, Linda Sarsour, if you can talk about the Arab American and Muslim vote in Michigan and how both Trump and Harris have appealed to or not appealed to the hundreds of thousands of voters in Michigan who are Arab American or Muslim.
I have been organizing in Michigan for the last few months, and today I was at polling sites across south end of Dearborn, around eastern Dearborn, and I saw a high voter turnout. I saw lines that I hadn't actually seen before in Dearborn. The sentiment is very mixed on the ground. The community is not monolithic. There were some people who were willing to share as they came out of polling sites who they voted for. Some did disclose that they did vote for a third party, many for Jill Stein, also some for Dr. Cornel West. There were a very small minority of people that did disclose that they voted for Donald Trump. And yes, there were some, a small few that I was able to talk to that did say that they voted for Kamala Harris more so because they did not want to see another Donald Trump presidency. So the sentiment is mixed here, but what's beautiful is that many people were going for down ballot races. There were many Arab American, Muslim Americans on the down ballots, especially things like school board judges. So the turnout is there, but I think the community here is still devastated. Many people here are voting around Gaza. That is the motivating issue that is bringing them to the polls. So we're just watching this election, Amy. I can't believe it's this close. That's the sentiment here. Why is this election so close? Why is there a competition between Kamala and Donald Trump at this time in 2024? So again, we're like everybody else around the country. We're waiting to see what the final results are.
And what is your sense, Linda?
Because of Gaza, like I think for Harris it was mostly in the bag, at least more than it is now, if not for Gaza.
What are you hearing? Why is the race so close?
I think that there have been miscalculations that have happened across the board. I think that this idea that Gaza is not a central issue to many voters across the country, including anti-war voters, progressives, young people, students across the
Yeah, we need Trump to deport us commies to Cuba. Exactly. Better being deported than being tortured in a prison cell.
country, and of course Arab American, Muslim American, and Palestinian American voters who happen to find themselves highly concentrated in states like Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, and Georgia. And that's one. Second, people like Donald Trump were leveraging the trauma that our community has been experiencing, and also that Kamala Harris's campaign ignored critics within the community who wanted to share policy demands with the vice presidential candidate or the vice president Harris, and she did not engage people in the community. The campaign sheltered her from folks that could have really given her insight and given her the truth telling about what it is that we expect from her if she were to be the president of the United States of America. So there was some, in my opinion, lack and deficiency of the campaign reaching out in a genuine, authentic way to Muslim American, Arab American, Palestinian American voters. They wanted to decide who our leaders were.
Yeah, because she's a fucking disgusting Zionist coward who has way too many donors that are Zionists. She's a disgusting coward. So yeah, of course she ignored Palestinians. She kicked Palestinians out of like rallies. She's silent. Yeah.
Allowing us to decide who our leaders were to speak on behalf of our community. Donald Trump mosque hopped. He went to different communities within the Arab American community. He met with religious leaders. I, as you know, despise Donald Trump. I don't want to see Donald Trump in the White House again. But his campaign did the type of outreach in parts and elements of our community that the Kamala Harris campaign did not do.
You know, Linda, we interviewed the mayor of Dearborn after he refused to meet with...
Get fucked, Kamala. Get fucked, you evil slimeball.
With President Trump when he came to Dearborn just in the last few days. The question is, of course, when it comes to Kamala Harris, why from the Democratic convention refusing to have a Palestinian American voice on the stage of the DNC, right through to, we just interviewed an Arab American leader in Michigan who ran in the primary for Congress. He lost, but he was invited to a private event with Kamala Harris, and he was in the theater there. I think that area was called Oak Park.
Royal Oak. Yes.
Oh, Royal Oak, that's right. And right before it started, someone asked him if he'd like to get up and follow them. He did, thinking they were just moving his seat, and they ushered him right out the door, and there were police there, and they said...
And I watched the talking about this guy. The dude was not a pro-Palestinian activist. He was just a random Democratic Arab, and they literally kicked him out because they thought he was... Just because he looked Arab, they kicked him out. Because they thought he was going to, like, protest. Ugh.
If you dare to make trouble, you'll end up in a police car. Ultimately, he was the Kamala Harris campaign apologized to him, though gave no explanation, said anytime in the future he would be invited into an event.
I know Dr. Ghanem very well, who is the gentleman that you were speaking of, Amy. And this is the kind of things that happen at the Kamala Harris campaign events. It's not enough that people give apologies. Someone needs to be held accountable. We've seen this before. I don't know if you remember, Amy, back in 2008 when Obama was running and he came to Michigan and he was doing a campaign event, and then his campaign staff moved two young Muslim American women wearing hijab from behind him where he would be standing in the camera shot. And once Obama found out about that and he found out that those young sisters were moved, he was outraged, and he picked up the phone and he called those sisters. He told his campaign, find me these sisters, and I need to call them because this is absolutely unacceptable. You know, the campaign put out a statement, but Kamala Harris never picked up the phone and called an important figure in the Muslim American community. Dr. Ghanem is not just a regular guy. He's a very well-respected leader across the Muslim American community that has been doing work for decades in the larger Michigan Muslim community. So again, there's been a lot of shortcomings of the campaign in genuine outreach to Arab American voters. Gaza is a top issue for these communities. This community wants to know, how are you going to end this genocide against the Palestinian people and against what's happening to our sisters and brothers in southern Lebanon, and of course course, the bombardments that we continue to see in Yemen. And that's what the community wants to know. So again, everything's up in the air here, Amy. I think people are really just wanting to see how Michigan turns out. I think Michigan is an important question for the demonstration of the Arab American vote. Was there really a protest vote? Were people scared of a Donald Trump presidency that they were maybe willing to vote for Kamala? We don't know this until we see the results tonight.
We want to thank you, Linda, for joining us. Linda Sarsour, Palestinian-American Muslim organizer, author of We're Not Here to Be Bystanders, and co-founder of Empower Action Fund, speaking to us from Dearborn, Michigan. She's been organizing in Michigan now for weeks. We turn now to Tara Hauska as we wrap up this hour. She's an Indigenous lawyer, activist, and founder of the Ginu Collective, Ojibwe from the Cochiching First Nation. Tara Hauska was brutally...
Why can't the Zionists come to the conclusion that Israel being a pariah state is bad for the continued existence of Israel? Well, you know, because they want to solve the Palestinian question once and for all by just getting rid of the rest of them. And if they can pull it off, if they can kill 70, 80, 90% of Palestinians, then it's over. You know, they did it. They won. So if they can just survive long enough, if their genocide can last long enough to kill that 80, 90, 95% of Palestinians, where they're down to like Native Americans in America numbers, then they won. So they just need to they need to get far enough for Netanyahu to finish the job and solve the Palestinian question once and for all. That's what they're banking on. That's what they're hoping they can accomplish.
Arrested in 2021 for participating in a nonviolent action against Line 3. Joining us now from International Falls, Minnesota. Tim Walz is the governor of Minnesota. If you could just share overall your response to the latest developments today, this evening, in a very, very close race between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump. Tara.
How many times have we heard this is the election of our lifetimes, that democracy is on the line? We hear that again and again. Democracy is on the line. I do not understand why the Democrats do not act as if democracy is on the line. Why do they not listen to voters? Voters are telling you we have a number of issues, and one of them is a genocide that you are committing, that the United States is complicit in, and that matters to us. This election shouldn't even be close, yet here we are.
And Trump indeed is also leading in Minnesota.
Hell yeah.
Minnesota. If you could comment on that, Tara.
I haven't even seen that. I've been part of several different live streams tonight. That really does not surprise me. I mean, I think there is a growing red sentiment in Minnesota. I feel like people are disillusioned by the failures of the Democratic Party to follow through on a lot of the promises that they make again and again, and it is just not reaching the folks that have traditionally supported the Democratic Party. I mean, this is a strong, deep blue state, yet, I mean, I'm talking to you from International Falls, and this was blue for generations. It's now turned red. I mean, why did that happen? Because we see the middle class being gutted, and we see so many of these promises that are being made by them not being followed through on. You mentioned Tim Walz and Line 3 being brutally arrested. I mean, they made promises about specifically even that project. We will not, this will not happen through treaty territory if it's posed by tribal nations. And yet what happened when they got into office? It was silence, and we're going to let the process play out. Biden promising to be the biggest climate president in history, ran as a climate president. Then he approved more oil and gas leases in his first 2 years than Trump did in the first 2 years. I mean, it's just, again and again, these failures that I think folks are just fed up with, and they're looking for a different path, and Trump speaks in a very different way.
Tara, if Kamala Harris and Tim Walz become president and vice president, then Minnesota will have the first Indigenous governor, the lieutenant governor right now, Peggy Flanagan. I don't know if that could possibly be the case at this point, but your thoughts overall?
I mean, I think that would be an incredible moment for our people and for, the long history of this country and our continuing lack of representation in the seats of the empire. I think that we also need to recognize that no matter what color someone is that's sitting in office, no matter what their background is, that they have to be held accountable. And that means, regardless of the identity politicking that seems to be really, really prevalent right now in the Democratic Party, we need to see actions that match up with the words. The rhetoric is not enough.
The New York Times is reporting Trump has an 87% chance of victory at this point, as we talk to you at...
Wow! New York Times is saying Donald Trump has an 87% chance of victory. That's crazy, dude. Dude, it's going to be a wild 4 years. Vosh is going to be eating good. That's depressing to think about. Ugh.
.10:56 Eastern Time. Your thoughts on President Biden in Arizona, standing with Deb Haaland, the first Indigenous cabinet member, apologizing for the history of residential schools?
That was a beautiful, powerful moment that was brought about by decades of Native folks working from within, working from without, to bring about even the acknowledgement of the trauma that was brought upon our people, of the cultural genocide.
Sorry, guys. Sorry for the genocide. This is what they're going to do. They're going to do the exact same thing. 100 years from now, when the Palestinians, when there's only like a few 100,000 Palestinians left, they were all killed in Israel, America's going to do this. They're going to have the Palestinians there, and they're going to say, Palestinians, we are sorry we let Israel genocide you until no one was left. That is our bad. They can do the genocide, and then they can apologize 100 years later for it. It's fucked up.
That occurs to our people, of the fact that it was not that long ago, although U.S. history doesn't even barely acknowledge it. It's not taught to our children. My living grandmother went through boarding schools and residential schools. It is a powerful moment. I will also say that it is deeply shameful to me that it seems they chose this moment where they're actively complicit in a genocide of other people to apologize for the genocide on our people.
I know. It's like they happen to like do this apology for genociding the Native Americans, like while they're supporting a genocide going on right now.
And of course, he was interrupted by an Indigenous person who made that very point, apologizing for a past genocide, the person said, as a current one is ongoing. Tara Houska, I want to thank you so much for being with us. Tara Houska is an Indigenous lawyer, activist, founder of the Ginu Collective, Ojibwe from the Cochiching First Nation, arrested in 2021 for participating in nonviolent action against Line 3, joining us from International Falls, Minnesota. And I just want to read this note from Nate Cohen, chief political analyst at the New York Times. For the first time tonight, we consider Trump likely to win the presidency. He has an advantage in each of Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. To win, Harris would need to sweep all three. There is still a lot of vote left, but in the voting so far, Trump is narrowly but discernibly ahead. Again, that is Nate Cohen, chief political analyst at the New York Times. You are watching Democracy Now!'s War, Peace, and the Presidency. I'm Amy Goodman with Nermeen Sheikh. This is...
So who predicted Trump is going to win? Some organization officially is saying Trump wins. Okay, alright, we gotta go to Vosh, dude. I want to see the Vosh meltdown. Oh, Breakthrough News is also live streaming. Breakthrough News is also good.
Seeing it from the Trump side, but it does happen from the Democratic side too. As in Arizona, where I am, we've seen the campaign commercials, and the campaign commercials coming from the Trump side, of course, are just egregious. I mean, they're almost like the video that we're seeing right here of constantly showing people going through the border in these sort of grainy videos.
To use Jill Stein and RFK Jr. to
Is he whining about Jill Stein? That's incredible. We literally join it and he's literally bitching about Jill Stein. Oh my fucking
honestly
god.
Looking like Jill Stein voters not making a huge difference anywhere. Yes, we should be thankful for that. It does look like, despite a massive campaign to use Jill Stein and RFK Jr. to pull votes from Democrats, it genuinely does not seem like many are being pulled. Some are. Why does Nebraska always have some red and some blue in every election, Matt? Because they have a split electoral college. They have split.
Okay, if Trump is like truly gonna win, we'll go back to Vosh and see the meltdown.
This is a 4-hour special. In our last hour, we will be speaking with, among other people, Katrina vanden Heuvel from The Nation magazine, publisher of The Nation magazine, and more. Let your friends know, Democracy Now! Will also have a 2-hour special tomorrow morning, 8 to 10 Eastern. Stay with us.
Okay, now we'll go to Breakthrough News.
That almost in the way that the kind of narratives that are superimposed over them create this like horror flick sort of scenario almost. But I've been watching the Democratic ones as well. Like we have Senate Ruben Gallegos, and we have, of course, the Harris commercials, and they'll put in the similar border pictures that aren't quite as bad, but still it depicts the border as this volatile and chaotic and violent place. And today I actually went down to report on the border. So today's election day, I'm going to go right to the border. I'm going to go right to the border wall, and then I'm going to ask people about. I just wanted to do that and do a report right from the border, just to be in the place that's been so characterized as this violent and chaotic place, when in reality it's just people going about their normal lives.
So Todd, I think an element of this I'm also curious about is, one of the reasons there is flight away from Latin America, specifically to the U.S., is because of failing economies and violence, and that is often the outcome of horrific U.S. policies, whether it's policies of regime change and sanctions that have destroyed economies like those in Venezuela or Cuba, or whether it's constant intervention in places like Haiti or Honduras or El Salvador or Guatemala, or just generally speaking, the neoliberal policies that have been pushed on these companies to privatize everything and empower resource extracting industries that literally have militias that kill people to get them off their land. I guess all that's to say, do those policies change under one of these people or the other people? Like, it seems to kind of be a constant inflow of immigrants, whether we're talking about a Democrat in office or a Republican in office.
And they don't. They don't change. It doesn't matter who's in office. Those sorts of policies not only don't change, they're the things that we don't hear about, right? It's amazing just to follow the immigration story and how it's the national discourse, the national narrative around immigration and borders, and how little is mentioned about why people are leaving where they're leaving, why people end up at the border to begin with, right? It's almost as if they come in a vacuum and they arrive to the U.S. border, and there's no reasons behind why people are coming in the first place. And more specifically, not reasons having to do with the U.S. foreign policy or U.S. economic policy. And I can tell you, like as watching, a lot of times it'll be characterized, the word violence will be, there's a violence in this country or violence in that country, but rarely is that word unpacked. So it's almost xenophobic in its own right, just using that word. And then you're supposed to assume, that country is just violent. That must be just that way in that country. And then we get this lazy analysis, and the lazy analysis doesn't look in the U.S. foreign policy, doesn't look at how, for example, U.S. corporations are crossing borders into other countries and stealing their wealth, going into communities and stealing their resources. I interviewed a woman from Honduras recently who was blockading a cemetery in her community because a mining company was trying to mine silver and they said that they found some deposits underneath where her grandmother was buried. And so she, because she did the blockades, she got these death threats. And because she got these death threats, she left, and she ended up being deported several times from Mexico once, and then she finally got to the United States, got caught by the Border Patrol, and ended up in an immigration prison for a year. And all that, but the whole story about the mine and the resource extraction, which is one tentacle of what U.S. imperialism, if we're going to go into that, right? It's one tentacle of it. But that story is obscured. You don't hear that story at all. You don't hear these stories of...
Yeah, I mean, he's perfectly right. I mean, Breakthrough is right as usual, where it's like, yeah, America destroys these countries, historically and today, completely pillaged, destroyed, raped, murdered, genocided South America, Central America. And then these people flee to our country because we have the wealth that we stole from them. And then then right wingers and the Democrats use the immigration to, for cynical political purposes. It's so disgusting and depressing. Anyways, let's go back to democracy now. I wish I could watch both of these at the same time, but whatever.
One re-election, fending off a strong...
It's a challenging evening. I think there was more expected from numbers and from states like Georgia and North Carolina. And it's more of a slog. We're not seeing, I don't think, the surge of the women's vote. It's women, stupid, is something that's been going around. It's the women. Thank the women. Of course, we'll thank the women, but I don't see that surge we had hoped to see. And I see worse numbers in some suburban areas than even Biden got. I guess it's an evening where we're losing a very great senator, possibly, as you said, I think it was 250,000 votes, you said, divided. Moreno, the challenger, the car dealer, from a great Senator Sherrod Brown, who came to the Senate in 2007, I believe, from the Congress.
That's crazy that Sherrod Brown is going to fucking lose. As far as Democrats go, Sherrod Brown was one of the more leftist populist ones, but apparently he's getting kicked out. Dude, America is just a fucking disgusting place. It is a disgusting shithole cesspit. Just a fucking miserable cesspit, dude.
Congress, and has been not only what you said, Amy, someone who opposed the worst of America, the authorization to go to war in Iraq, Patriot Act, but stood for the dignity of working people in a state, Ohio, which has gone increasingly red, except for Sherrod Brown in elected office.
Yeah, Sherrod Brown opposed the invasions in Iraq and Afghanistan, I believe. As far as Dems go, he was somewhat left, and he loses. It's like, ugh.
But most important is how it will move ahead in these next hours, days. Let's not forget that in 2020, the election was decided on Saturday in Pennsylvania. So I think it's a tough evening, but I think we still have to look ahead. I would add one thing, which is this: if it does turn out that Trump returns to a White House he has defiled in a previous term, I think there are questions about the Democratic Party and the campaign strategy of Kamala Harris, but we're not there yet. And I think we have to keep our focus on the prize.
Well, Katrina, could you explain? I mean, you've said that women turning out in as large numbers as was anticipated perhaps didn't materialize. But is it possible also that there were more women? Of course, this is all very early and we don't know anything definitively. Whether more women would have voted for Trump this time?
Yeah, I really want to watch both Breakthrough and Democracy Now, but I can't. So I have to pick one. I'm round.
We don't know, do we? I mean, maybe you have been watching exit polls. I do think there was a campaign strategy to rally women, which is smart. Women hold up half the sky, they hold up this country. The carrying economy, which has been Kamala Harris.
Women, did she just say the Mao quote? Did she just say women hold up half the sky? Did she just say drop the Mao Zedong quote? This random ass boomer white lady. Speaking of China, thank you again, Wesley M, for the $10. Means a huge amount. Seriously, thank you. I honestly think at this point America is the 21st century version of Qing Dynasty China. A failing imperialist system and crazy schizo religions and cults arising. I mean, I don't know much about Qing Dynasty China. Late Qing Dynasty China. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that America is an empire in decline, for sure. But that's interesting. I don't know.
Harris's contribution in many ways to rebuilding, reconstructing America had a lot to do with women.
Oh shit, did they call North Carolina for Trump? Oh yeah, they did. Wow. She's gonna lose it. She dropped the ball. She's gonna lose for sure, looks like. Unless some shit really turns around.
Who take care of the children. Childcare is extremely expensive in this country, to take care of the parents and get caught. There was, I think, the strategy of going after suburban women may be something to look carefully at. The strategy of going after a kind of coalition that didn't play to the base. Mobilize your base is a wise strategy in many ways. Kamala Harris decided to go for what I might call the hug Liz Cheney route. And she did so with vigor and vim. And maybe that raised questions, not just among women, but men, working people who wanted more on the economy. I think we do hear, certainly out of Georgia, more on the economy. But the assault on abortion rights, post-Dobbs, we still don't know fully, but should contribute to a surge in women's votes. And yeah, I mean, I think working people of all kinds, and there's also this kind of sub-campaign, which I think should go on in any case, what I might call it the post-it election, where, you know, women are often under the thumb of a partner or husband and worried about voting in a way that they would disagree with. And there was an effort to make sure women knew they were of agency and could vote for whom they wished.
I mean, I think it was Congressmember Cheney, Liz Cheney, who first brought up that, you know, you can go with your husband to the poll, but your voting is private and you don't have to vote the same way that he does.
That's what Liz Cheney may have said.
And then Harris made an ad about that, and clearly that got under Trump's skin as he called for her to be shot in the face.
I mean, you just said something, Amy, which is just what he has said in these last. Donald Trump entered our lives electorally with talk of American carnage, of dystopia.
Oh, Vosh is reacting to NC being called. This is the main bright spot, is Vosh being angry. That is the main bright spot. Although honestly, it's going to be good for his bottom line because he gets to make another 4 years of Trump bad.
In North
videos.
Carolina, it's like what, 160K difference. Well, we'll see with North Carolina, but it looks like it's been called.
Yeah, I mean, Vosh is secretly happy because what he cares more than anything about is making money. And Trump winning is great for him making money because his entire channel is built off of Trump bad, basically.
Yeah, of anger, of violence, punching people in the face, shooting people in the face. I sometimes wonder, he ran a campaign which was about immigration and safety on his own terms, but the immigration and economy to a certain extent. I think Trump, excuse the pun, the issues of democracy. Democracy is an extraordinarily important idea, term, and principle. It means different things to different people. I do worry it's become a little of an elite presentation. A lot of money, funding goes into it. And the extremism versus, the fascism, authoritarianism, which is real, versus democracy, might not have played as well. We don't know. But I do think the economy, this country is in economic pain in many ways and wants change. I mean, I don't want to speak for the country, but Kamala Harris's campaign has been more about continuity and about a kind of economy. She did talk in a more kind of inclusive populist way about price gouging, leading to the rise in prices. Inflation did play a role. It's not President Biden's fault that what he did with his Bidenomics and certainly the massive stimulus around COVID averted a recession and did lead to better economics. But if you avert something, like you avert a war through diplomacy, you don't get as much credit as if you go to war or if you don't fulfill the stimulus, which he did do. Trump took credit. He wrote his name on checks. I mean, he's a huckster. He's a grifter. By the way, there was a lot of talk about Trump, as there should be, but people know Trump. Many people know who he is. The question is what you are going to do. And I think Kamala Harris is and was terrific when she said, I have a to-do list. He has God knows what list. But that fueled down a little after the convention. I still think a kind of multiracial populism speaking to the economics of a country, fusing it, by the way, with abortion rights, which are a part of an economy, part of family issues, part of sitting around the kitchen table, led to this divide led to a massive gender gap, which women, great, but the young men who were increasingly turned off. That's a larger discussion about what is being a man in the society. But boy, did Trump, play to it in the worst, most derelict and dangerous ways.
Katrina vanden Heuvel, let me ask you about the lack of sunlight, any distance between Kamala Harris and Biden when it comes to Gaza. Many people said, she is the vice president and she can't oppose him publicly right now. But when Biden had that gaffe after, the whole statement about Puerto Rico being a floating island of garbage at Madison Square Garden, and Biden was asked about it, and he said, something like all his supporters are garbage, and then said he didn't mean to say that. He meant to say the so-called comic that said it was garbage. Kamala Harris was very clear. She said, no, he misspoke, and he didn't mean that, and he corrected himself. But then she said, but I want to make a statement about this. And of course, she said, you cannot characterize Trump supporters in the same way you can characterize Trump. So she was very clear and very definite. But when it comes to Gaza, she could not bring herself to do this. When it came to the tens of billions of dollars that the U.S. continues to fund, billions of dollars of weapons, send to Israel, she not only would not speak out against that in any way, but also refused to allow Palestinian voices or meet with Palestinians in Michigan who asked to meet with her, allow them at the Democratic National Convention speaking from the stage. Your thoughts on this? And do you think this ultimately is what, if in fact, and it's absolutely too soon to say, could cost her the election? Because Arab Americans, Muslim Americans, young people, progressive Jews, African Americans, indigenous people in this country all deeply care about this issue.
So I think, Amy, I go back to begin at the convention in Chicago. It was not difficult to bring on a Palestinian voice. Uncommitted, talked to Waleed Shahid about this and James Zogby. The committee organizing the convention, I think, had many choices. And there was a doctor who came onto your program and spoke after the convention, denied a place. That was not difficult. Once that happened, it seemed pretty clear that Kamala Harris would not distance or distinguish herself in any real way, substantive way, from President Biden. I think you have to go back to President Biden and the failure, almost criminal failure, to abide by American laws, to send offensive weapons to Israel, to arm to the teeth, is against American law, Leahy, human rights legislation, and other factors that could have been used. Certainly the money keeps pouring in, even after the most genocidal actions. I would make a distinction between the statement she read about the comic. That becomes more of a campaign trope. This is a fundamental issue of war and peace, which in my mind is why I think Cheney and George W. remain in some ways worse than Trump, war criminals. But if she wins, she's going to enter a world with two wars. And by the way, it is, with the exception of Democracy Now! And a few other media outlets, I hope the nation, it's a measure of the terrible media malpractice in this country that so little in this campaign, in debates, et cetera, revolved around the world. But she will enter a world of two wars, Ukraine being the other, also war crimes. And there hasn't been any significant kind of effort, not simply to distinguish from Biden, but to speak to the issue. There's been some softening about the Palestinian casualties in her discussion. But it will be interesting to see what comes out of mostly Michigan and the uncommitted vote and how that has played. But she was not going to move. And I do think when you become a candidate, certainly in the kind of strategy Kamala Harris, and I don't want to put this fully in the past tense because we still have, again, it wasn't resolved until Saturday in 2020, but you become, once you choose the campaign strategy she did.
Weslam134 with another $10. Thank you. If you want to know why I compared the USA to Qing Dynasty China, look up a little thing called the Taiping Rebellion. I know it by name, but that's all I know about it. Taiping Rebellion. Oh, was this with the fucking crazy dude who said he was Jesus? Or like the brother of Jesus? That's insane. That is so fucking bizarre. And like 30 million people died. Yeah. Jesus Christ. And like look at the deaths of the leaders. Like everyone died. That is insane. That's just crazy. Absolutely insane. Like some guy calling himself Jesus's brother goes on to kill like 20. I mean, he was probably, justified in rising up. Even if it's a weird reason to rise up.
Not a captive by any measure, but someone who's involved with an establishment consensus. And I see the strategy she's run as president in that mold, and I see the willingness not simply to not step back on the Gaza crimes, but also to take on this Manichaean view of the world as divided between authoritarianism and democracy. God. I think that is simplistic. I think it leads to an over-militarization of our engagement with a world that doesn't demand American indispensable nation leadership. It does demand an America that is abiding by treaties, abiding by its best interests, and abiding by a respect for the world. And I think some of the world in this time has bypassed America because it sees it not standing up by any measure for the principles it proclaims as the leader of the free world, a key I do not have on my computer and wish I had not just used.
We're talking to Katrina vanden Heuvel, publisher of The Nation magazine. We're also joined by Jean Guerrero. Jean has written extensively about immigration, among many other issues. As we watch the results come in, Jean is the contributing opinion writer for The New York Times, joining us from Los Angeles, author of Hate.
I mean, yeah, I think the American decline can be compared to a lot of declines of empires. The one I know most, and I still don't know much, is like Roman Empire. Like, corruption, decadence. I think there's a lot of similar themes. The ruling class becomes more and more greedy and consolidates more and more money and power in itself, and neglects to actually maintain the empire over time.
Hate monger Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the white nationalist agenda. Yes, former Trump White House advisor Stephen Miller immediately launched into an anti-immigrant racist tirade when he took to the stage last Sunday at Madison Square Garden.
Who's going to stand up and say the cartels are gone, the criminal migrants are gone, the gangs are gone, America is for Americans and Americans only?
So that is Stephen Miller, who often precedes Trump when he speaks at rallies across the country. Jean Guerrero, it looks
That's
like...
That's crazy that Stephen Miller is still around, because Miller was like the most far-right part of Trump's cabinet. And he's like the only guy left of the original dudes, because Stephen Miller was like, I think, one of the original fucking guys, and he's still around. I mean, it goes to show that Trump has moved further right. I mean, he has moved into the fascist territory with the kinds of people he has around him. Like, every moderate Republican is, like, done with Trump. But yeah, I mean, I think what this could be a, Trump is like a sort of Julius Caesar, if Julius Caesar was way worse. And not that Caesar was good. I feel like this is the transition of the Roman Republic to the Roman Empire. I think there's a good chance Trump will try to... But I just don't know. I don't think he's going to go emperor mode. I don't think he's going to abolish elections. I think he's just going to try to make the country as right-wing as possible. Put in as many judges, But I don't think he's going to end democracy. He's just going to make the already really shitty American democracy even shittier. But I don't think he has the balls or the desire to become a dictator. Someone like Stephen Miller would love to be a dictator, but I don't know about Trump. If that makes sense. But then again, he could. He also could. Because unlike 95% of political commentators, I don't just state something as if it's going to happen. I don't know. Who knows? Well, yeah, that's a fucking great point, Nikki, man. That is such a fucking great point. Augustus never actually was like an emperor. He just slowly sort of consolidated power around himself in a very clever way. So he never like ended the republic and became like an emperor, so to speak. And I think that's what Trump is going to do. I think Trump is just going to like consolidate power. But after the 4 years are up, do I think he's going to stay? I think he's going to just pick a successor, but what I think is likely is he's going to rig the democratic system so strongly for the right to try and ensure that the right wins the next election. It could backfire. He could go too far. I don't know. We'll have to see. I really don't know.
Mike, at this point, with the New York Times saying a Trump victory is likely, Stephen Miller becomes ever more important. Can you respond?
Absolutely. I think that if this election goes in favor of Trump, it will be in large part because of the Democratic Party's failure to come up with a counter-narrative on immigration, which is the #1 weapon of the Trump campaign. Kamala Harris, during her campaign, has failed to frame immigration as an economic issue, which it is for millions of mixed-status families across this country who have had primary breadwinners deported over many decades by both Democratic and Republican administrations. One of the reasons that we are not seeing one of the reasons inflation isn't as bad as it might be is because of immigration. And there's so many ways to frame immigration as an economic issue that benefits the United States. These are people who build America's homes and highways, people who harvest America's crops, who take care of the elderly in our hospitals, and who Trump has promised to round up en masse and deport. And I think that what every viewer, every listener out there needs to be asking themselves right now is if Trump wins, what are you going to be doing to defend immigrants from these massive deportations? I think this is an urgent question, even though, again, it's too early to tell what the results are going to be. We have to believe Trump when he tells us what he's going to do. And if Trump returns to the White House, he is going to unleash a historic era of devastation on immigrant and mixed status families across this nation. Immigrants are the #1 scapegoated group in the United States since Trump decided to make immigration his signature issue. These are people who are forced to live in the shadows, and Trump wants to hunt them all down. So I think it's imperative that each of us who is listening ask ourselves, if Trump wins, what am I willing to do? Am I willing to put my body on the line to stop these deportations and to protect people? I'm not just talking about undocumented immigrants. If Stephen Miller has his way, which he will if Trump returns to the White House, he will be able to fulfill his worst his most anti-immigrant fantasies towards immigrant communities. It won't just be undocumented immigrants who are targeted. It'll be legal immigrants. I
mean, I wouldn't say this person is like a lib necessarily. They're just saying what Trump is going to do to illegal immigrants. I mean, I don't think anything she's saying is probably out of the realm of reality.
Even J.D. Vance has said that they're not going to rule out deporting.
Thank you, JJJ.
Dreamers. They said they want to revive the Alien Enemies Act of 1798, which would allow them to deport both legal and illegal immigrants. And even countless Americans would be deported simply because they are Latino or are racially profiled as immigrants. And that may sound like hyperbole, but there's a precedent for this, Operation Wetback in the 1950s. In fact, my great uncle, who was a U.S. citizen, was deported from this country as a part of that operation. But Trump's plans would be exponentially worse because of the scale. There's 22 million people in the United States who live in mixed status families, where there's at least one undocumented person who lives with a U.S. citizen child or a relative, a green card holder. And these are all families that would be subjected to separations, where parents are deported and the U.S. citizen children are left as orphans. And it would be economically devastating to this entire country, but especially to immigrant communities, which have already endured, as I said earlier, decades of deportations that have stripped families of primary breadwinners over and over again, and is one of the reasons that we see immigrant communities, Latino families across this country struggling economically the way that they are. And the last thing I'll say about this is just that I think if Trump wins, it will speak to a inadequate outreach to Latino communities, particularly young Latino voters who have the most at stake in this election. More than half of them have an undocumented family member or a close friend. More than half, and Latino youth are also more likely to be LGBTQ. They're more likely to have immigrant parents. So they have a lot at stake in this election, and if they don't turn out in the numbers that we are expecting them to, and deliver this election for Harris, it will be as a result of inadequate outreach.
And Jean Guerrero, you said earlier that, we don't know precisely how this will turn out, but Trump certainly seems much closer than was expected earlier to the White House. If you could say what you think a more effective counter-narrative, that the Democrats could have a counter-narrative on immigration, what would that look like? And then if you could respond to what's happening with Proposition 314 in Arizona.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, so the entire immigration debate during this campaign has been in terms of what's happening at the border, in terms of border security. And Harris has been touting her credentials as somebody who was in favor of a border bill that would have increased resources for Border Patrol and stopped fentanyl from coming into this country. And to some extent, that was strategically targeting moderate voters and trying to counter Trump's narrative about her as an open borders candidate, which was obviously a false narrative. But they entirely failed to counter the demonization and the scapegoating that Trump made a hallmark of his campaign, constantly putting out information about immigrants, painting them as criminals, highlighting cases, very rare cases of immigrants, murdering U.S. citizens, and trying to paint that as something that's happening widespread in the United States. There really wasn't a strategy on the part of the Harris campaign to counter that scapegoating. They sort of ignored it and failed to really emphasize that immigrants are a huge strength in this country and are the reason that our economy isn't worse than it is right now. And they are people who build our highways and our homes and harvest our crops, and we depend on them. And there wasn't that counter narrative. And I think that framing it as an economic issue would have been really...
I don't know why people keep calling this lady a lib. She has not once said that Kamala Harris is a good criticizing Trump does not make you a liberal, guys. I don't know what she has said to make her a liberal.
Transformative. And the other thing
what she repeatedly said, Kamala Harris and her surrogates, was that they support the bipartisan, mainly Republican bill, that the Senate had hashed out and that Trump rejected. That's as far as she would go, which was overwhelmingly about militarizing the border, Jean.
Exactly. And even though her campaign was very much about, freedom to have control over your own body and various other freedoms that the campaign focused on, they never talked about immigrant rights or the border in terms of freedom. And I think that was a missed opportunity. And I think it reflected a sense of fear that ultimately played into the Republicans' hands because there was no counteroffensive to this just relentless demonization of immigrants and this perception of immigrants as the problem when in fact they're just the scapegoat that Trump is using to distract from the fact that he has no real solutions to the problems of working class and middle class Americans in this country.
Well, Prop 314 is winning by 61% of the vote in Arizona. And while I'm giving numbers, Trump is leading in Arizona by about 3,000 votes. And you have the New York Times now saying that the needle is up to 91% probability that Trump will win. Harris would have to win all three key blue wall battleground states, Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. The question is, will she win any of them? We're going to turn right now. I want to thank you, Jean Guerrero, contributing opinion writer for the New York Times, joining us from Los Angeles, author of the book Hate Monger, Stephen Miller, Donald Trump, and the White Nationalist Agenda. We still have Katrina vanden Heuvel with us. We are going to turn to...
I think Hassan said that Kamala Harris was going to win. Yeah, he said why I think Kamala Harris will win. Hassan's election coverage is just awful, dude. He is not... I feel like he's really just lost in the Democratic sauce. Like, why did you just... I don't know.
Christina Greer as well. I want to get Katrina's quick comment on this latest news. The Times having it 91% probability Trump will win.
I don't mean to make light of it. Maybe is it the digital tech team at the New York Times on strike? Maybe, I'm sorry. There's been some mistakes. I still say let's wait for the morning. There's something about the Times Interactive, whatever it is, that deep into red reminds me of the polling. But I guess above all, I think the comments on immigration were very important, because I think there's a militarization of so much. There's an issue of public security and public safety, but that doesn't need to be about demonization or militarization, which is seep too far into our political culture.
Is Mike from PA live? Or is he just on Twitch? It's funny, because I know Mike from PA is super anti-Kamala, but he also kind of glazes Hassan a lot. So it's like, it's a weird situation to be in.
And work, and that's my sense. I think there may be a lot of recrimination about failed establishment consensus or failure to be bold and find a counter narrative, which is going to be so key in the days and months ahead. Counter narrative, and thinking anew about not just the Democratic Party, but as your previous guest said, about policies that have scapegoat.
Hassan is not a bad person or just a hardcore lib just because he has supported Kamala a little bit. He's just... I don't know. There are certain reasons that Kamala would be a better choice. Of all people, Gabriel Rockhill, who I of course highly respect, even said to vote for Kamala, mainly because it would be easier for the left to organize. Because Rockhill's fear was that, and if you think Rockhill is liberal, then I don't know what the fuck to say. Rockhill is like a hardcore socialist. He's an activist socialist, he's an academic socialist, but even Gabriel Rockhill was saying, like, vote for Kamala because at least she won't like literally like kill leftists and imprison them all. Now, who knows if Trump will actually do that? So, we'll see if that happens or not. I don't know. But I mean, I see the merits of both ways. I don't take a stand. I mean, I didn't. I mean, actually, I think I did say don't vote for Kamala, which I still sort of stand by, but I just don't really care much either way. I don't know. Yeah, go ahead and vote for Kamala if you want, but if you do, you're not a leftist and have no right to call yourself one. Yeah, I mean, I think that's still I don't know. I don't want Trump to put me in a prison and kill me, I'll be honest. But yeah, I mean, I guess that's how it is.
Voted and not improved the lives, and go more economic populist, economic, and not militarization.
In addition to Katrina vanden Heuvel, we're joined by Christina Greer, Associate Professor of Political Science at Fordham University here in New York, host of the podcast FAQ NYC, and host of the Blackest Questions podcast on the Brio, and the author of Black Ethnics, Race, Immigration, and the Pursuit of the American Dream. Your overall response to where we stand at this point, Professor Greer, it is just about 11:30 p.m. Eastern Time. The New York Times is predicting a win for President Trump. He just won Iowa, which what is considered the very reliable Des Moines Register poll that just came out had predicted that Kamala Harris, in fact, was possibly going to win that state just by a few percentage points, but still it surprised everyone. But in fact, that isn't the case. Your response overall to what we're seeing? We're waiting to hear from Michigan, Wisconsin, and Pennsylvania.
Right, I agree with Katrina. We're still waiting to hear, and I think as we move past this election, we'll have to have a real deep reckoning with what polling looks like in the 21st century. But to discount this election right now would be foolish. Right now, the map looks very similar to 2020 with Joe Biden, and we're still waiting to hear from Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin, very important states that have very blue cities in those states. And if we zoom out 30,000 feet, all states are red states. It's just, do you have enough blue cities in your state to flip it to a Democratic blue state every 4 years? And so until every ballot is counted, in Pennsylvania, we know that they don't count absentee ballots until Election Day. We know that, Wisconsin has shored up their absentee ballot counting, but it still takes quite some time. And similarly with Michigan. So we might not know anything this evening, especially because so many big cities have yet to come through on that ballot. And if the blue Western Wall holds.
I think saying a vote is pointless is not materialist, it is idealist. Especially with someone like Bernie Sanders. Would voting for Bernie Sanders, would that have been pointless? I'm not saying he was going to be fucking Vladimir Lenin. Obviously not. But would he have been way better than Trump? Yes. So would voting for Bernie Sanders have been pointless? Would that have... I just don't understand when people say voting means literally nothing, because it's just not a materialist analysis. It's an idealist analysis that is not based in reality.
For Kamala Harris.
Functionally identical to the Democrat Party line. I mean, Bernie Sanders was pro-universal health care. I believe he's still pro-universal health care. Bernie Sanders has stood up to oil and for climate change a lot more. So, I mean, it depends on how you define pointless, I suppose.
And those 3 states that have a lot of Democratic cities in them, I think we could see possibly a different result. So I'm not counting her out just yet.
To shore up what you're saying, 5 million votes were cast in Georgia. 9% of the vote is left to count. So that's close to 500,000 votes are left to count, most of which are from heavily blue metro areas, Professor Greer.
Yes, and we also know that Georgia is known for their shenanigans when it comes to counting votes. And so I think, a lot of times people want results the evening of Election Day, but we have to recognize that it's more important to get it right.
I mean, Bernie didn't really shift the Dems, I feel like, at all. I mean, Kamala Harris is super right wing. I mean, she's going more right than Biden. At least in her platform. I mean, I don't see a difference between Kamala and Bill Clinton. And Bill Clinton was a complete right-winger. So, yeah, I don't think Bernie really succeeded in shifting the Dems left. I think he shifted the voting populace left. I think he definitely opened a lot of voters' eyes and shifted the voters left. But did he shift the Democrats left? Maybe a little bit, but not much.
And to count every vote, than to just give people some sort of projection just because that's what they desire. So if it takes time, it takes time. We do know that Republicans are great at saying, well, if it takes time, then it must be election fraud and we definitely won and we're claiming victory. But that's not necessarily the case. And so we do know that this has been a highly unusual campaign. Kamala Harris had a very short runway. We do know that this country is probably more divided than we've seen in modern history. We know that Donald Trump has excavated some of our worst fears in many ways for a whole host of reasons. And we know that the Democrats have tried to build coalitions that have made progressive Democrats quite uncomfortable. So we have a confluence of factors as we emerge from COVID that bring out states and certain voters that make this election unlike 2020, unlike 2016, and definitely unlike 2008. And so I think, as my grandmother would say, time reveals all things, and we just have to be patient for the electoral process to do its thing.
David Schuster, formerly with MSNBC, just tweeted, the night is feeling a lot like 2000 election. Gore thought he'd lost Florida. He was down 200,000 votes and didn't realize most of Miami had not yet reported. The networks, MSM, didn't realize it either. Then Miami came in and the Bush lead evaporated. Lessons learned. Katrina vanden Heuvel.
We lived through a coup. 537 votes led George W. Bush, according to the Supreme Court, to be elected. He was elected. The Supreme Court should have been impeached. But what also happened is there was the Brooks Brothers riot protest in the streets of Dade County. The right-wing Republicans protested and scared and manufactured a fear that led somewhat to the outcome, whereas Jesse Jackson and progressives wanted to protest union labor. But what came out of that was there was no real reckoning. I believe that James Baker and Jimmy Carter or put on a blue ribbon commission. But here we are. Gore didn't need to concede. Again, I think there was an establishment consensus, and they rounded up the best speechwriters, the John Meachams of that time, just make a concession speech that spoke to freedom and liberty. But I think if you look back, that was an American coup. Where we are now is what Christina said so well: is we should have patience and see what the blue wall produces. And patience is not an innate American characteristic, especially around elections, but I think it's important now. And to learn the lessons of 2000, if those are going to be parallel lessons, which I have heard more and more, and of course you raised it, Amy, but I think there are lessons to be drawn. There will be a reckoning if Kamala Harris does not win, about strategy, about et cetera. But the courts, of course, as Christina knows well, and you do too, and our correspondent, Justice Correspondent Elie Mystal, that was not even the right-wing court we have now. So the damage that could be done, and people should again look at Project 2025 for more of a kind of manifesto.
To those who say that a third-party vote helps Trump, you imply that if there are no third parties, we'd all vote for Harris, which is simply untrue. Yeah, I mean, true. Perfectly true.
Much more fierce than the Heritage Foundation document when Reagan became president and followed that. These are all things to factor in as we talk tonight, because there is a pattern that 2000 showed, which we need to resist.
Well, we're joined now in Washington, D.C. by Daniel Nishanian. He's editor-in-chief of Bolts, a publication that covers local politics and policy with a focus on voting rights and criminal justice. Welcome to Democracy Now!, Daniel. If you could...
Am I going to jail too, or can I...
You're gay.
I know, but hold on.
You're gay, dog. You're going to jail and hell, okay?
Okay.
You're going to both.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to use all the rest of my
I'm doing it already. I'm doing such a good job. I'd be such a good fucking right-wing girl.
I'm going to go...
Holy shit, Hassan has 270,000 viewers, dude. That is absolutely insane.
The only wins Democrats had, they had Josh Stein, who beat Rob the Gooner. They had the TikTok guy who won in North Carolina. And I think Gallego...
Yeah, I don't think we're going to get much out of that.
Could respond to the results that we've seen come in so far. What's most surprised you?
Well, we don't know yet the results at this point of the presidential race. I just overheard others on the panel speak about that and how we need to wait. Former President Trump seems to have a lead at the moment, but it's still too early to call. But what I am watching, throughout the night, especially as the federal government looks like it will potentially go back to Republican hands, is what is happening at the state level, at the local level. And this really, for two reasons. One is obviously always important for questions of civil rights, voting rights, criminal justice that you just mentioned. The state and local level is super important. But also, if the right is going to come back into power in D.C. at the federal level, there's going to be even more attention, I think, in some quarters about what's happening in state courts, what's happening in DA offices, and whether those are spaces for an alternative set of issues and an alternative set of approaches, a place where maybe the left or the Democratic Party or different flavors of that politics can thrive. So there's a lot that's happened also at the state and local level. Conservatives have made a lot of gains. We could talk about that, but there have also been some bright spots for progressives potentially.
So could you tell us what are those bright spots, Daniel?
Yeah, so for instance, the race that I was following earlier tonight in the first part of the night was prosecutor races in Florida. So the governor there, the Republican governor, had removed from office two prosecutors in Orlando and Tampa. In the last couple of years, he had just removed them from office, making the case that they had violated the duty of their office because they were reforming the office. In one case in Tampa, the prosecutor had said he would not prosecute abortion cases. And now the two former prosecutors, the Democrats, were trying to gain their office back against the appointees of Ron DeSantis. So it's kind of a split result. So I don't know if it's a bright spot for the left necessarily, but in Orlando, Monique Worrell, who's a black woman who was just removed from office, as I was saying, by the governor last year, won easily as she won her job back. Even as in Tampa, the Republican appointee survived against a comeback effort. Florida obviously has really seen a red wave tonight. Another race I would mention in Michigan, obviously we are waiting for the results of the presidential election in Michigan. It appears there that Democrats have expanded their majority on the state's Supreme Court. Now, that's very important for issues like abortion rights, issues like voting rights that might come under continued assault by the federal government and by federal courts, of course. So,
bro, the live map is glitched out. Fraud. They're gonna give the vote to Kamala. It's a fraud. They're gonna give the vote to Kamala. That's why the system's down. Wow, the system is actually legit down. That's fucking creepy, dude. That's crazy. The whole map is down. Oh wait, the numbers are back. Let me see. Nope, the map is still down. Maybe that's just a Bing moment. Hey, Chemical Mind, I wanted to ask you a question. I'm disabled and it is hard to go in person to events, so what would be a good way for me to help a leftist party / movement? Well, I am a terminally online fucking loser keyboard warrior, so I do not know how to answer that. I mean, I think that as a disabled, that's an extra element. I would say maybe as a disabled person, your best option would be to become a keyboard warrior, because guess what? Keyboard warriors are actually important. Propagandists, people who push the Overton window left, people who educate. That could be a niche that you could use to be a propagandist. That's basically my niche. That's where I kind of feel comfortable, at least at this moment in my life. So yeah, I mean, because I know as a disabled person, you know, it might be harder to go outside and leave the house. So being able to, you know, just do stuff at your computer, that kind of thing, could be a possibility or an option. Yeah.
So for liberal attorneys to be able to go to a state court system, that is actually extremely important in the years ahead, potentially.
We're talking to Daniel Nishanian, who is editor-in-chief of Bolts, a publication that covers local politics and policy with a focus on criminal justice and voting rights. We also just heard that Adam Schiff won the Senate race in California. Now, we don't know the balance of the Senate or the House yet. The House could be determined by races in California and here in New York. Can you comment on these, Daniel Nishanian?
Yeah, we don't yet know what's happening in the House. The Senate seems like Republicans have a clear edge in taking the Senate at the moment, with some with leads in races like Ohio on top of the one they've already flipped in West Virginia earlier tonight. The U.S. House at the moment is very much uncertain. There's so much happening in California and in New York and other states that are a little behind on the count. It definitely looks like Democrats are running generally a little bit ahead at the congressional level than they're at the presidential level, which is potentially creating the possibility, even if Trump were to win the presidency, which obviously we're not at this moment.
Yeah, I mean, like a vanguard party and the whole idea of propagandizing and all that, it's a very diverse, you know, thing. There isn't just one size fits all role, you know. There's all sorts of, you know, roles that you can fit into in the broader thing. You can be a journalist, you can be a graphic designer, you can be an artist, you can be a propagandist like me. You can be an activist, you can be a theorist, you can be I mean, there's probably other things. I don't know. That could be worth making a video about. And you can also be multiple things rather than just one thing. Like, I'd consider myself a propagandist and then also maybe a bit of a commentator, and then like maybe a bit of a theorist as well, because I've been working on some theories. So I've found multiple roles that I feel comfortable with. So just find whatever you feel comfortable doing and do it.
I'm sure yet it could create the possibility of a split Congress. I will say that still would take a lot of wins by Democrats at the moment in races that are at the very least very uncertain. So it is also very possible at the moment that there's a Republican trifecta in 2025.
Christina Greer, as you hear this discussion, if you want to comment on where we stand at this point, again, we don't know about the blue wall states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And the most populous areas, for example, Pennsylvania, have not been completely counted.
Right. And so, you know, I do believe in waiting for the results. I mean, the larger question is, why is it so close? Mm-hmm. And so whether or not Kamala Harris is victorious or Donald Trump is victorious, we need to ask ourselves, why is it that someone who represents the Republican Party was able to do so well with a platform that is anti-immigrant, anti-woman, anti-LGBTQ+, anti-environment, anti-education, anti-intellectualism, anti-economics? You know, when you have dozens of security advisors saying that this man is a danger not just to America but to society writ large, we have to ask ourselves, why is it that so many Americans are invested in this type of isolationist, draconian type of politic on not just the federal level but trickling down to, you know, the Senate and the House? And
okay, this lady definitely sounds like a hardcore lib.
Obviously, state.
Anyone who uses the word isolationist like it's an insult when it comes to America is a fucking delusional. It would be much better if America was isolationist than the way America is now. Okay. Now I'm about to go back to breakthrough news if they keep having on fucking liberals like
country.
this.
And so as we stand a very divided nation and we wait for results to come in, if it is indeed true that Donald Trump goes back to the White House, I think the Republican Party, because he has so few real Republicans working in his administration, he literally has some of the bottom of the barrel individuals who have not been Republicans or in the Republican establishment. They're just there as sort of barnacles to get their agenda passed. And we know that with Donald Trump, all you have to do is give him a modicum of flattery and you can get your way. And so we have to ask ourselves, what does the future of our democracy look like? You know, in so many ways, we ask ourselves as organizers, who do we want to be in opposition to? Kamala Harris was the type of person that so many people thought, at least you can have a conversation and negotiate and come to the table in a good faith effort to get certain important issues across the finish line, whether it be climate change, whether it be Gaza, or some sort of international or domestic issues. We know how Donald Trump will behave. He has told us time and time again how he feels about particular policy positions. So the fact that so many millions upon millions...
A neoliberal nightmare. A sizzling hot full festival for folks who love Coachella. So this lady wrote for like a... Wait, but then here it says it's a left-wing company? Okay. Very weird. Very weird. Whatever. I don't
Americans
care.
are willing to take him at his word and believe him and still vote for him. Says a lot about where our nation is and how so many people, in the words of Lyndon Johnson, where, he said, if you can convince the poorest white man that he's better than the Negro, then you can pick his pockets all day long. We have so many people who are just willing to do that to someone else that they feel is lesser. And I think that's the type of politics that Donald Trump has excavated in this country, and it's the worst of our ideals.
Well, Professor Greer, I want to thank you very much for being
our ideals, our American ideals, the ideals of America.
With us.
Shut up, you dumb fucking moron.
Professor at Fordham University here in New York. As we turn right now to Amy Littlefield. She is the abortion access correspondent at The Nation magazine, independent journalist who covers reproductive health. Amy, you're at a watch party for Amarillo Ordinance, as for the first time ever, the anti-abortion ordinance was rejected in Texas. Can you explain where you are? And then if you can talk about the 10 states that have abortion ballot initiatives on them, and what do we understand has happened at this point? We know Florida, the reproductive rights referendum has gone down. In Missouri, a reproductive rights referendum has passed. In Arizona, it clearly looks like it is leading, as it is in Montana, Nebraska. But Missouri, extremely significant.
Maybe it's almost back. Nope.
As it was the first state after the overturning of Roe v. Wade to essentially ban abortion. Amy, what do you understand at this point?
Well, Amy, I can tell you I am right outside of a watch party for the pro-choice contingent that just successfully made history and beat an anti-abortion ordinance here in the buckle of the Bible Belt, Amy. This is truly amazing. I mean, every other time that an anti-abortion ordinance has been put to a citywide ballot in the state of Texas, it's passed.
All right, let's move to breakthrough news.
Who can cross the border? In this case, U.S. companies and a mining company, and who can't? Or U.S. military. So 800 bases around the world. They can cross U.S. military can cross borders wherever they please and go and put up bases wherever, right? And so who can cross, who can't? And then how are those foundational to why people are leaving their homes?
Yeah, no, I think it's absolutely crucial. I mean, as much as we had some conversation about the root causes of immigration in 2020 and that was put out there, that's all been pushed to the side. Well, as always, Todd, we really appreciate you being willing to join us. It's not as late there, but still staying up pretty late for us. As always, happy to have you with us here on Breakthrough News. Thanks so much.
Always great to be with you, Eugene and Rania. Thanks.
Mm-hmm. Katie is back.
Well, guys, I am looking at these maps, and it is not looking good for Kamala Harris.
Well, I can say that Trump supporters are already celebrating on social media, but I think that there are some points that they could potentially be let's see. I mean, there's 90% of votes counted in Georgia, for instance. But when you look at this sort of county by county map, you can see only 49% from Chatham County. That's where Savannah has come in. You look at the more heavily Republican areas, a higher percentage of votes have come in. You look at Gwinnett County, 80%. You look at Pennsylvania, which seems to be trending away from her towards Trump. Similar sort of piece. I mean, someone just sent me a note that she's outperforming Biden in the suburbs of Philadelphia, but you can also see in a number of them, some of them Bucks County, I don't think a lot of people live there, but, even Philadelphia itself still has about 43% of the vote left to come in. So, there's some other kind of, you might call them notable factors from other races that maybe speak to how it's going. Somewhat surprising to me, it's basically tied in the Wisconsin Senate race with about 66% of the votes in. And also a little surprising to me, it's, Dave McCormick, the Republican candidate in Pennsylvania, is ahead now. So it's not exactly clear, I think, how this is breaking. I think that Trump The Trump camp absolutely feels like they're about to have a blowout. They think they're going to win Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, and Wisconsin. Some of them, I think they're going to win Minnesota, too. Arizona, Trump is basically continues to be tied with 50%. Ruben Gallego, though, up on Kerry Lake. So it certainly means there could be some split ticket. That's the Senate race there. Some split ticket voting happening there. Dan Osborne, the independent from Nebraska, in a dead heat with Deb Fischer. This is interesting. He's independent, but he was one of the leaders of the Kellogg strike in 2021. He's a union president. He's been running on a very pro-union, pro-working class platform. He's also tried to kind of co-opt some elements of the Trump campaign as well. And some.
Am I American? What do you think? Do I sound American? What do you think?
Elements of the Democrats, says he wouldn't caucus with either, but a lot of people in the labor movement talking about Dan Osborne neck and neck right now with 60% reporting. And on a similar note, you've got the paid sick leave referendum there in Nebraska that would give 5 days of paid sick leave to everyone who works at business with fewer than 20 employees, 7 days for more than 20 employees. I think a lot of people thought that because paid sick days being critically important might help Osborne get over the hump. But so anyway, that could end up being a spoiler. I mean, the Republicans only needed 2 seats, I believe, to retake the Senate, but that could spoil it. But I don't know. I still think we're kind of in it could go either way territory, but I can definitely say that there are
not fat enough. Yeah, I gotta pump that with I gotta pump those weight numbers up.
There's celebrations happening amongst Republicans, but when you look county by county, a couple of these should shift.
Well, the New York Times, just so you know, and you can think of it what you make, I have not looked at the specifics, is saying 89 chance of victory for Donald Trump. So I don't know where they're coming up with that statistic. They're estimating Donald Trump will likely get 299% of the electoral votes, and Harris will get 239. It is still, you're right, there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been counted yet. So, obviously we have to wait, but saying an 89% chance of victory, I mean, I don't know why you'd say that unless it's really likely. They're saying a likely Trump victory.
Yeah, I mean, they are saying that. The needle has been wrong before, though, so, that's...
But also, then in that case, it's really irresponsible to do that, because you know what the Trump people are going to do if they don't win, is that's going to give them a reason to say it was stolen.
Yeah. I mean, I have a friend someone I really trust on data stuff, says that it's either going to be Trump, or if it's Harris, they'll be close enough that he's definitely going to contest it.
Yeah, North Carolina just called for Trump. So, yeah, I mean, it's just Trump has more paths to the Electoral College, right? So if he can win just one of Michigan, Wisconsin, Pennsylvania, he throws a big wrench into Kamala Harris's campaign. And then if he wins Georgia, that's kind of one of the key states she could make it back with. Then she also has to win Arizona, which is obviously very hotly contested. Nevada, we have no results yet as of now, but that also comes into play. So I think we're in the state of the night where you can see the way it's trending is it looks like it could be getting away from Kamala Harris. She has to get, I would say, a significant number of all the votes that are left to come in Georgia, Pennsylvania, and Wisconsin. Michigan is still counting very slowly, 31% of the votes. It's trending towards Trump, but I think at 30% of the votes, it's honestly very difficult to say.
I want to be very clear. I mean, if Kamala Harris loses and Trump wins, there's going to be a lot of different reckonings and narratives about why. There's a clip I wanted to play earlier, but we ran out of time. It's a clip of a young man named Ali from our focus group who actually endorsed Trump. He's quite young. He's Yemeni American. And I think it's an important clip to play because there are people who voted for Trump because of the Democrats running, essentially, on genocide and refusing to abandon it in the Middle East. Can we play that clip of Ali from the focus group? So I want to ask the 2 people who are voting for Trump. We have Ali and Sammy. So I want you to explain, why are you voting for Trump? And if it's related to what's happening in the Middle East, how do you think him winning will be better? Sorry.
First off, whether my opinion is towards Trump or Kamala, I look at all of you guys like brothers and sisters. My political view should not affect the way you look at me, and your political view should not affect your my way of looking at you. My family my grandfather has always been Democrat. He's always been, as all us Arabs, we're always the backbone for them. And I really don't think they ever appreciated us. And that's the only reason I'm going for a Republican, and that's why I'm voting for President Donald Trump. I understand some of you guys have a different point of view.
I mean, I totally agree to not vote for Kamala, but why do you think Trump is going to help you? I guess, I don't know.
And I respect it, and I still look at you the same way like I always do. But from my point of view, I have family at Yemen as well, and I have my brothers and sisters in Palestine and in Lebanon getting killed every single day. When you see Trump coming to Dearborn, and when you see him, I feel like he's really focusing on us Arab more than 2016. Back then I was young. I have no clue what was going on. I just wanted to go play Fortnite or do whatever I want to do. But now I'm really getting into the family business. I'm really holding into my college. I'm trying to pursue my life, and I really do see President Trump, being the best choice for us. Kamala and Biden, as I like to say, we're in a very, very unique election. We get to see both administrations that already ran. Technically, Kamala already ran. Biden is not even our president. I really don't look at him as my president, and I know some people here agree that he's not our president. But Kamala has a stance too. She had a stance on the border control. She had a stance on Palestine. She said there will be a ceasefire. I've never seen one CNN always comes out every other week. Oh, Kamala is asking for a ceasefire, but never happen. They keep making us getting those promises and making us promises and be like, hey, we're gonna take care of you guys, but never end up doing nothing. I'm tired of it. I really am, and that's why I'm voting for President Donald Trump. We really think he's gonna give us peace. He's giving us so much promises, and if he doesn't do it, letting you know, we will hold him accountable.
Yeah.
So there you have it. I mean, I don't obviously I don't agree with that sentiment, but, and I know he said something about the border that was a little bit awkward, but the point is, and I think it's a very naive outlook because he did have other options besides Trump and Harris. But that said, there are people who did that, who voted for Trump because Kamala Harris chose to stick with genocide, and Trump is paying lip service to whatever peace in the Middle East means. And you know, that's something that's like we shouldn't ignore. I know we won't, but the mainstream media, if he wins, is going to ignore that and blame people who voted for third parties.
Yeah, it's already started. It's already starting. I'm like taking screenshots of the people saying, if you voted, I blame. This is why you don't vote third party. It's just the absolute gall of people who are blaming people who felt like they couldn't vote for Harris instead of blaming the Democrats for not doing what they knew statistically from polls was going to be popular, which was saying not the day before that they were going to end the war in Gaza. It just, I don't understand how people can, I understand people thinking that Trump will be worse. Like that's totally, I understand that. But the idea that you're going to blame the people who felt like they couldn't vote for the people who oversaw genocide, either of their people or if they're not Palestinian, just a genocide of people. But it's especially rich to think that you're going to blame someone whose own people are being killed and decimated and genocided. The fact that you would blame those people, even if you're upset about the outcome, I just, it's mind-boggling to me. And you see the stuff with, okay, well, they're the ones who are going to be deported. They're the ones who are going to be banned. It's disgusting.
Yeah,
and just no desire to actually look at how this could have been avoided. Because you don't actually care. Democrats don't care about, according to them, defeating a fascist, which is what they say Trump is. Because if you care about defeating the fascist, then you look at the polls, because they bow at the feet of polls, right? And the polls were saying it would be popular to call for an arms embargo.
Yeah.
I just want to point something out. Kamala Harris is likely to, well, she's definitely not going to win the south end of Dearborn, an area with 90% plus Muslim voters. Biden won that area with 88% of the vote 4 years ago. So you can't sit there and tell me that those people who overwhelmingly voted for Kamala Harris before are all just a bunch of idiots or racists or stupid Republicans. That is, there is a very specific reason that number happened.
Yeah.
Right.
No.
Rani Kalek, the chick on the right, she always makes good points. Yeah, it's not like people want to vote for Trump. They just don't want to vote for Kamala. So either they don't vote or they vote for Trump.
No, I think that's true. I think we do have the map that we could bring back here. You know, obviously North Carolina was called for Trump, Oregon for Kamala. Most of the West Coast, is out there pretty clear where that's going to go, all things considered. Yeah, well, I feel like that map looks like we have Washington State colored for Trump, which is not true. That's definitely going to go for Kamala Harris. But that being said,
really?
Washington State colored for
what the fuck? Washington has gone Trump,
which is not true. That's definitely going to go for Kamala Harris. But that being said, North Carolina, obviously a state I think the Democrats are hoping to take one off the Republicans. That is not going to happen. Probably wasn't necessarily a huge surprise to anyone, but nonetheless, that is the case. But, nonetheless, we are moving forward here. A lot of continued watching of a lot of different pieces. The House seems like kind of a mixed bag to me. Yes?
Well, I just want to say one thing. I'm just scrolling through my Twitter timeline just to see what people are saying. And you know what came across my feed is somebody we've had on our show, Abu Bakr Abed, who's in Gaza. And he says, we can't endure this anymore. My body is so fragile. May you feed us and give us a drink. May you end this horror. I've never, ever been through this. May you give me patience and strength. This is somebody who's literally in Gaza and starving. And I'm just like, my timeline makes no sense. Like this year makes no sense. I don't know what to say anymore. Someone is starving on Twitter, live, right in front of our eyes. And then there's all this commentary about the election and numbers, and he's going to still be starving. What a horrible system we have. I'm sorry, I don't have to just state the obvious, but it just feels so horrible. It feels like no matter what, he loses and we lose, and it's just really painful. And I know that we have to have ultimately understand and recognize that this is a long struggle, and we can't be just in despair about it and stuff. It's just painful. It's painful to watch that, and it's really just painful to just keep talking about it over and over again, hoping that maybe at some point, if we talk about it enough and draw attention to it enough people will have enough empathy for Arabs in these places to make it stop. I don't even know. I don't know. It's really unfair. That's all. Sorry, guys. It's late at night and I'm upset.
No, I think that, what you're saying, Rania, is I don't want to say glimmer of hope because that sounds too positive, but as depraved and sadistic and sociopathic as our leaders are, and these total idiots on Twitter who are already blaming people for voting for third party, I do think that this has become one of the major moral issues of our time, and we are seeing people waking up to it in a way we haven't before. That's because there's been live streaming a genocide, so the reason for that is absolutely tragic, and it's an abomination.
What's frustrating is what's the introspection going to look like? And I know I'm jumping the gun because nobody's been called yet, for one or anything. But since we're looking at what the numbers are showing so far, just thinking about the level of introspection or the lack thereof, you know, I don't know. But I know we have a few other clips we wanted to play. We wanted to play a clip.
Wait, is Trump gonna win the popular vote? You are fucking joking with me, right? Because that would be an insane mandate. Like, that would just be... I mean, it's one thing if Kamala loses the electoral vote, but if she loses the popular vote, that's like... I mean, a catastrophic failure. Hillary Clinton beat Trump by over like 3 million votes. Hillary fucking Clinton beat Trump by 3 million votes.
Of people at a marching for Gaza about abandoning Biden. And I think it's important there are some voices in the crowd that we should hear from. So can we play that clip? So tell me, why aren't you voting for Joe Biden?
I am not voting for Joe Biden because I finally realized that man is a racist.
I'm not going to vote for someone who funded a genocide. Absolutely not. And I don't think there's any way he can recover from that. His best bet right now is to drop out of the race.
And why not?
Because why would I vote for someone that's calling for the genocide of my people? I'm Palestinian myself, so how am I going to vote for someone that's fine with the people of Gaza being slaughtered?
It seems like he has no regard for human life, especially when it comes to Arabs. And it's really disheartening the fact that we have to live in the U.S. knowing that this is how our government feels about us. In D.C., there's a bunch of homeless people, and some of the money that could have been given to Israel could have been given to these people so that they could get off the streets and have a successful life. It seems more that he cares about the people overseas rather than he cares about his own constituents.
Joe Biden, Sleepy Joe, as I like to call him, he's not listening to us, and it's not right. I can't name one thing Joe Biden has done that was good. Not one.
While he's doing this in Gaza, he's also still trying to do the border walls, and he's also trying to keep kids in cages. Like, he thought that was going to be done with Trump. He's still doing it too.
The United States people have awakened to the fact that we are constantly facing the reality that we have to vote between the lesser of two evils, and I'm tired of making that decision.
He might be the lesser of two evils to you, someone living in America, but to someone in Palestine, they're the exact same, you know?
Wow, that chick, that last chick was spitting. These people are spitting.
Biden's unwavering support for Israel's genocide has totally shattered his support among young and progressive voters. But supporters of Palestine aren't just planning on abandoning Biden this November. Many are revolting against the idea that they should have to pick between two morally reprehensible candidates at all.
And I have been a lifelong Democrat. I have supported this man. When we found out he won, I knocked on my neighbor's door and we popped champagne. We celebrated his win. We were so excited. And today, you know what we do today? My neighbor and I, we shed tears. I will not be voting for Joe Biden, but the sad thing is, I will not vote for Trump either. So as a Democrat, a lifelong Democrat, I really hope that we start...
Fucking, like... And Kamala Harris she chose to drop these... It's just mind-boggling to me, you know? It's just mind-boggling. It's just mind-boggling. She chose Liz Cheney. That is who Kamala Harris chose to side with, was Liz Cheney. It's incredible. But yeah, this is better than Democracy Now!, honestly. I'm glad I switched to Breakthrough.
Thinking about who we can run on the ticket in 2024, because it honestly cannot be Joe. And if we elect Trump, if we stay home and Trump wins, Palestine will be even worse. Joe Biden has utterly failed our...
All right, guys, it is, like, that's from January. Did we point out that clip's from January? Obviously, that's why they're talking about Joe Biden. But I think it's important to remember that because that is proof. No, but that is proof that Democrats have seen people abandoning them for months and months and months. Yep. And they have chosen to cover their ears. Literally at the DNC, do you remember the iconic image of that woman putting fingers in her ears as they walked by anti-genocide protesters? So I want that to be remembered. We have it documented. This is not like just last month or a few weeks before the election, people started saying we're abandoning Biden, we're abandoning Harris. This has been going on since last year. I still remember the protest that Breakthrough News live streamed last November in DC against the genocide in Palestine. Last November, a year ago, almost. And what was the common phrase I heard speakers saying? It was like, in November, we remember. In November, we remember. As in next November, we're not going to forget this genocide. And there were people in the Democratic Party at the time saying they'll forget by next year. They'll forget by next year. Guess what? It's next year, and they didn't forget. They're angrier than they've ever been. So I want to keep reiterating this. I know I'm going in circles here, but we need to continue to reiterate this because I refuse to be blamed or let anyone I know who refused to vote for this genocidal party be blamed for what we're about to maybe witness.
Right. Yeah. And if they cared this much about, if they really saw Trump as a fascist, why weren't they demanding that the Democrats do the right thing? Electorally speaking, forget the moral issue, which I would like for people to care about, you know, children being starved, being operated on without anesthetic. Like, it would be nice if that was an issue. But even if you have a heart of stone, but are like a blue MAGA type, you should have been moving the Democrats to do what the polls were saying would be popular for them to do. I have empathy for people. I really do have empathy. This is something we can debate, but I have empathy for people who think Trump is going to be worse for the world. Whether or not that's right, that's in itself is not, I don't think, an inherently disgusting position. But what's inherently disgusting and what is unforgivable is to, regardless of what you think of a Trump or Harris presidency, to blame people who couldn't bring themselves to vote for Harris. That is not, these people are not the enemy.
Yeah, well, I think that's true. I mean, but undoubtedly they'll have no choice but to blame people because it's so obvious what they've done. And I think that were Trump to win, and I think there's certainly predictions that is going to happening now. I think the question you have to ask yourself is how do we get here in the first place? And I mean, everything that Trump is capitalizing on was bipartisan. There's no doubt about that. But there hasn't really been as hard a break from the Democrats at many of these points, especially when it comes to the wars and the other things happening abroad. I mean, there was a little bit of a shift on the issues of like trade and unions and so on and so forth, away from the sort of NAFTA consensus. But even there, when you think about how the Build Back Better plan was set up by Biden, that was nothing.
Yeah, I mean, between Democracy Now! And CNN, I'd always take CNN, of course. I'm not saying Democracy Now! Is, like, terrible or anything. Of course not. But they do have some libs on. And Breakthrough News does not have libs on. They have actual socialists on. They are, like, an openly socialist platform. And they have 900,000 subscribers, which is crazy. Even though their live views are pretty poor compared to like the insane views that someone like Vosh gets, but But yeah, I would say Breakthrough News is probably the best large leftist like news kind of like YouTube news platform.
Crazy. It was just an extension of existing social programs and giving them more money so they could address things more significantly, extending the child tax credit, like things I would consider to be basically, simple things, broadly supported. They couldn't even pass that. And it wasn't because of the Republicans per se, it was because they were sabotaged by their own party. And of course, Joe Manchin is the person mentioned the most, Kristen Sinema. But the reality of that is they're really covering for about 12 other people who really didn't want to vote for it either. And we're happy to have them as a stalking horse, as it concerns the overall issue of, anyway, I lost my train of thought. The basic point here being that there's just a lot happening on the screen, so it's hard to stay focused. But, the basic point being here, I think, when you look at what is happening, that the Democrats have acquiesced to a pro-billionaire agenda. I mean, you look at everything Kamala has been saying in the whole campaign. I mean, she's going out of her way to talk to the crypto industry and say that she will be fair to them. She has, at least according to the Financial Times, although her campaign is pushing back on this, promised to try to get rid of people like Lena Khan and Gary Gensler at the FTC and at the SEC, who are known for being more aggressive against corporations in general in the first half and financial corporations as it concerns the latter person, and replacing them with more quote-unquote pro-business people. She's brought in Tony West, the attorney for Uber, her brother-in-law, who is one of the top advisors for Uber's legal cases. He's been fighting them in court to make sure that drivers are considered independent contractors, so basically they will be able to be paid poverty wages or the equivalent of poverty wages, in all the different places around the country. I mean, she's been saying how she's getting support from the biggest people from mergers and acquisitions and all these other places. So she's gone out of her way to really court a more conservative pro-billionaire agenda rather than pushing back against this at the time of the greatest cost of living crisis of all time. And in fact, has not really aggressively, I mean, she has talked about it, but hasn't really aggressively tried to wage much of an offensive against what is universally reported in the media, despite it being totally false, that inflation was really about government spending, when we know for an absolute fact that inflation was primarily due to corporate profiteering on top of the existing issues like the war in Ukraine, the COVID-19 crisis, which were kind of the proximate issues that started the whole thing. So, I mean, rather than embrace a sort of broad social agenda, they have set out a place where it's made it easy for Trump to pick people off here, there, and everywhere. I mean, you have the just conservative people in the country, but beyond that, individuals who are so tired of what's going on and are looking for more of a disruption. I mean, this came up in the Data for Progress poll they did earlier this summer about swing voters.
Yeah, I mean, that's what's so funny about how liberals love to say that Kamala is the lesser evil. Exactly. Like, if we're going by the lesser evil metric, then China is incredibly the lesser evil compared to the U.S. But they would never apply that to China. Someone like Vosh would never admit that China's... He's said he thinks the U.S. is a better power than China. He's said this. When that's just obviously not true. Selective spectrumistics. That's what it is.
When it was just a two-candidate race,
thing is completely
the majority of them, or the
What's another
plurality of them,
website
were voting for Trump. I actually have it sort of in front of me. But when it went down to a six-candidate race, which included many third parties, the thing that you actually started to see was that the two major parties got very little support. 4% backed Biden this in the summer, 7% backed Trump. 46% actually, by the way, were supporting Robert Kennedy, and 12% other third parties. Kennedy, of course, not backing Trump. But I think what you can see very clearly is that people are looking for something disruptive. And while Trump is pro-capitalist, anti-worker, an insane militarist, the reality is is he's so rude
Well,
and
Harris
crude
with
that he does seem to be breaking from
194,
convention.
former
Because on
president.
some things he's breaking from convention, maybe in a good way, negotiating with North Korea. But by and large, Trump breaking from convention is just saying racist, sexist things in public, transphobic things in public that people feel are like kind of in politic. But I think in people's minds, when you look at the Democrats are so status quo, and you're like, well, the past 40 years, the status quo has got me nothing, so I can't expect anything from them. I think even if you don't expect that much from Trump, you might be thinking, okay, who's more likely to really kind of shake things up? Like you hear Trump say something like, we're going to cap credit card interest at 10%. Bernie Sanders only said 15%. Now it seems highly unlikely that Trump would do that or Congress would ever pass it. But you might think as a layperson, well, if someone was going to shake up the credit card industry, is it more likely to be Trump or Kamala? And I think we've underplayed how Trump's sort of outsider disruptive agenda, however fake it may be, is actually playing into a very strong desire. 69% of Americans, I believe it was, told the New York Times they thought the economy should be either majorly changed or completely torn down. 70% amongst black people, 70% plus amongst Latinos, amongst people under the age of 30. So people want big transformative change. Neither candidate is offering big transformative change. And I think that rebounds in the favor of Trump as a candidate who seems to be a disruptive force in the political scene, even if he won't really address change. But I think people are so desperate, that's where it leaves them.
Right.
You're muted.
Yeah. Oh, I'm muted?
No, Rania.
Oh.
I'm muted. I'm basically always muted. Just assume I'm always muted because you hear me. I actually was hoping we could play a clip that we didn't get to play, and that is a clip from our focus group. It was a clip with someone called Rhetoric who was not voting because he's basically like, he explains anti-imperialism and his views on why he didn't want to vote. I think it's an interesting take because there is a group of people who did not vote. I'm not saying he represents all of them, but this is one of the reasons a certain type of person did not want to vote. Can we play that clip of Rhetoric from the focus group?
He's gone now, but he said America lost its integrity, and I was going to make the point that America, since its inception, did actually have integrity. But no, but on a serious note, I think one thing people lose sight of, like when they talk about these two parties, and again, I think it's like if I could leave here having accomplished one thing, it would be to convince everybody that every time we bring up the discussion about the Democrats didn't do this and the Republicans didn't do this and whatever, it's like that's the whole point. They are both two fronts of a corporate empire. The only reason why they come to Dearborn, for example, and beg for our votes is because they want to ingest us into the system. Why? Because when you vote, you're not just voting for one candidate, you're voting for the legitimacy of the system. And if you want to pay attention to how the U.S. empire deals with the elections in countries that are opposed to U.S. hegemony. Look at how the U.S. empire and the corporate media deal with Cuba, Venezuela, the Islamic Republic of Iran, all of these countries. Whenever their elections come around, the U.S. empire is always talking about how the people don't believe in the system and the elections are rigged and blah, blah, blah. Why? Because they want to delegitimize the system so that they can go take some lovely U.S. democracy to them. So if you reverse engineer that, then it's the same idea. When you go and vote, there's like, if you play the game, you have to accept the outcomes. If you go vote...
I mean, he's totally right, Iran isn't exactly like a fucking socialist paradise, but guess why Iran isn't a socialist paradise? Because the U.S. literally cooed Mossadegh out of Iran in the 1950s when Mossadegh was trying to nationalize the oil in Iran, and they installed the Shah of Iran. So, yeah, I mean, read any book by William Blum or Michael Prenti, the U.S. doesn't care about democracy. At this point, it's rote for me to even talk about, but it's still very important to talk about.
Vote for Kamala or Trump or even Jill Stein, although she's obviously different than them, although I think she has issues as well. But whoever you vote for, you're ultimately voting for the system. When you vote, you're giving consent for the system to govern over you. And when the sister mentioned that real political activism is not one day every 4 years, that's the biggest facade of U.S. democracy, is that you come every 4 years, you pick one of two hand-chosen candidates who are both set up to screw you out. Larry Fink, the CEO of BlackRock, he literally said, I'm sick and tired of hearing people say that this is the most important election of our lifetime, because in the long run, it doesn't matter. He's the CEO of the largest asset managing firm in the whole world.
Dude, this guy is way too fucking base. This guy is dropping way too many truth bombs, bro. This dude is absolutely fucking, way too cool.
And he's literally telling you it doesn't matter who you vote for because we're in conversation with both parties. You're getting it from the horse's mouth. But then we still come back and talk about how, well, we gotta make sure that we hold them accountable and the Democrats and blah 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 and all this stuff. And then just the last point that I want to end with is it's not that they just devalue the lives of people in West Asia, so-called Middle East, or brown people or whatever. These people don't care about black people. They don't care about brown people. They don't even care about white people. They could care less. You're just talking about the opioid epidemic. 90% of the opioids in the world were coming out of Afghanistan after the U.S. invaded Afghanistan. It's the U.S. military sending opioids, just like how Ronald Reagan brought crack to America. They don't care about black, white, anything. They care about the bottom line, which is their profits.
The pandemic disproportionately affects white people.
Right, so they don't care. It's not about even this whole idea of
they value human life.
Yeah, so and they want to constantly play on this idea that white people have it so great. 60% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. The country's falling apart. They don't care about anybody. They just don't care about anybody. It's not a broken system, as you said. The system is functioning exactly as it's meant to. It's an evil system. It's a satanic system. Bottom line.
Bro, dude, that guy was absolutely spitting. That was wild. a satanic system. He's right. As Ayatollah Khamenei said, America is the great Satan.
Yeah, no, I think a number of very relevant and important points, but one thing I want to say before we get to that, I see we have Kate Pritzker with us from the Breakthrough News team, but relatively big issue here. Bernie Moreno, the AP has called the Senate race in Ohio for Bernie Moreno. That is an upset. Sherrod Brown has been up pretty consistently in almost all the polls. He's beaten off Republicans many, many different times. This was a time that I think a lot of people are will be a little surprised by this. Ohio, of course, has been trending significantly more conservative over the past few presidential cycles. There have also been some, I think people were surprised at them at the time, but not surprised subsequently, issues as it concerns the broader sort of context of referendums and things like that. So it may not be that strange on trend, but it certainly is big. Republicans, I believe, are at 50 now, just about. So it looks like, and it seems pretty clear, they're going to get Montana. I mean, there's not that much in, but Tester is way down. State leans Democratic, leans Republican. Tough to say there. I mean, the Osborne thing could trip them up a little bit, but it seems like that might not be able to prevent them. Also, this one also a surprise. Very close between Tammy Baldwin and Eric Hove there in Wisconsin. So whatever happens in the presidential race, I would say for Democrats, it is not looking great for them as it concerns the Senate. House, a bit more of a mixed bag. A lot of the things are sort of shaking out as you might expect, sort of lean Dem or lean R. California, 45th district. Michelle Steele there is the incumbent. She's down. That's one of the few that are out there. So Republicans ahead so far, the number that are called. Democrats needed, I think, 6. I don't have it in front of me to pick up the House. Unclear if that can happen, but what I will say, that does seem to be not as consistent as what we're seeing in the statewide races for president and for Senate. So that's partially where that stands on a number of different fronts. Just looking at a couple other things here. Kamala has been announced as winning Virginia, New Mexico. I think I already said Oregon. So there's a lot of different pieces there. But let's bring Kay back on to introduce something that you all, I know, Kay, we're working on, you and Rania, in the context of all the reporting that you did out there in Dearborn.
Yeah, hi guys, good to see you. So I think Rania needed a break. But anyway, we've been going around Dearborn. I'm sure Rania's discussed it heavily tonight. But, I'm here also with Craig, and we've been hearing stories from voter after voter in a heavily Lebanese and Yemeni community, obviously one of the biggest Arab American communities in the country. And, we just wanted to play for you. Rania and I recorded our sort of reflections on the week. And we were just, having a discussion in the living room of our Airbnb about, what our thoughts are, not just about who we've spoken to, but I think in the context of the last year and, beyond just what it means for Gaza, but really what it means for American politics. So I don't know if we have the clip queued up, but maybe we can play it and listen to it right now.
Hey everyone, it's Rania and Kay, and we're here in Dearborn. We've been covering the election, so we've been here for a few days, talking to people in the community. This is one of the largest Arab American communities in the country, and it might be a decisive factor in the election. So Rania, I don't know what you've been thinking, these last few days when we've been talking to people.
Yeah, okay, so this is obviously, we're surrounded by people from different Arab countries that have been impacted by the genocide in Gaza, the escalation into Lebanon, and the bombings of Yemen. But I think for me, the most significant thing has just been the level of loss that individuals have experienced throughout the last year. A lot of the Arabs in Dearborn are Lebanese. A lot of them are from South Lebanon, which is what Israel is targeting the most. And so it just feels like every single person we've spoken to has either lost a home or more than one home to Israeli bombings, has lost actual family members. We spoke to a guy who lost 15 members of his family in an Israeli airstrike on a residential building in Beirut. Or their families are just displaced across, not just Lebanon, but there's people whose families have had to go to Syria, to Iraq. There's even people here whose families have been displaced to Dearborn because they've had to leave Lebanon. So just the amount of loss on a personal level is so dramatic and tremendous, and it's absolutely influencing the way people feel about this election. What about you, Kay? We've been here for 4 days. We've had a chance to go all around Dearborn, speak to so many different people. You've been covering the genocide in Gaza from the perspective of political movement building here. What's been your take on what you've observed?
Yeah, I've been just thinking so much about the fact that we're even here right now, the fact that the election is coming down to Dearborn and Arab America, because so many of the people here have been told for the last year, for the last 5 years, for the last 10 years, that their voices don't matter, that this is an inconsequential issue. They've literally been told at rallies, sit down and shut up. And the fact that, you now have a situation where it's the fact that we're even here, not just Breakthrough, but the entire international news media is here, from Japan, Brazil, everywhere in the world is here right now because it's a recognition that Palestine may very well be the decisive issue in a U.S. presidential election. I've been in the Palestine movement for almost 10 years. You've been covering this even longer, and it's I don't think, the one thing they would always say is this will never change. And it's I never thought I would ever see the day where Palestine would actually shift the outcome of a presidential election in America. But here we are. And, when we got here, Donald Trump's plane had just landed on the tarmac. He was here trying to basically reach out to Arab American voters. He went to a restaurant in Dearborn. Kamala Harris came and went to Lansing the next day. And they're making all these desperate, just disgusting overtures to Arab Americans, trying to win them over because they realize they screwed up. And they realize it's all coming down to them. And, they've brought out Barack Obama and Bill Clinton, and the message from the Democrats essentially is like, we know you're mad that we killed your family. We know you're mad that we ruined your life, and we're not going to change any of that. But what about the Muslim ban? And I think what I'm coming away with most is like, it's just not working anymore. Like, people aren't buying it here, and the frustration is so deep, and there's such a deep feeling that the Biden-Harris administration needs to be punished for this. And I would just say to anyone, I know it's hard to like feel optimistic in this moment, but like, this is something I don't think either of us would have ever foreseen happening, and it's happening now. And it's like, if you've just entered the movement in the last year, like, you have signed up really to fight the most sharpened, most inhumane, the cruelest, the most barbaric tool in the toolbox of the U.S. empire. We were never gonna win in one day. We were never gonna win in 1 month, but like, we are closer than we've ever been.
I think that's a really good point, and I think that what we're seeing here is an unprecedented shift in the Arab American community, because that's where we're based at the moment, but it goes beyond just the Arab American community. I think it goes far beyond that, to the point where I don't think in my lifetime I've ever seen such a massive disgust for the two-party system, a push towards third party. Maybe that was the case in 2000, but I was like still in school then and wasn't really paying so much attention. But this is definitely going to be looked at as, I think, an inflection point in the U.S. political process, and we're just kind of watching it play out in real time. But I think it's important to what you said, to keep that like positive understanding, as dark as everything is right now, and as much loss as people have experienced. This is radicalizing people to an extreme and important degree in terms of how they view the U.S. and how they view its role in the world.
Yeah, well, all very important points there. I thought the point you were making, Kay, about, it's people throw words around, should be hopeful, this, that, and the third. But I think seeing such a massive movement, and the biggest movement in solidarity with the history of Palestine, we've seen renewed activity on the labor front on every different angle. I mean, I guess the point, Kay, I'm raising here, and I think this is what you were getting at, is we can't let go of our own agency here. It's not just about who wins the election. It's about what people do after the election. And, many of the things Trump wanted to do the first time, he didn't do. Many of the things Democrats didn't want to do, they were pushed to do. So anyway, I think that's a good point. And maybe a key piece of the reflection you were making, Kay, is the importance of recognizing the agency of organized people in a context of a politics totally controlled by organized big billionaire money.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think none of this really would be possible if the movement for Palestine had given up 6 months ago or 8 months ago or 10 months ago, which is exactly what the White House, I think, was counting on. And I don't think any of us really expected people to be protesting for Palestine every single day, heckling politicians, like creating an atmosphere where basically anyone who supported the genocide would be ridiculed and, considered completely illegitimate in the eyes of millions of people.
I did not vote because I went to the voting booth and it turns out I wasn't registered to vote. I don't know why. I was already registered to vote, but they said that, I guess, because I moved to a different place. I didn't really like interrogate it much, but I think it was because I moved to a different place and I moved back or something. I wasn't registered to vote or something, which I didn't know that was a thing. I thought I could just vote regardless. I still lived in Florida. But yeah, I don't know. I wasn't really super eager to do it, so I didn't really look in to make sure I was registered, but I guess I wasn't, so yeah. Oh well.
But that's exactly what happened. And that's the only reason we're here on Election Day talking about this. One thing I want to ask you guys is, one thing that Ronnie raised, I know we played a clip from this earlier, was that interview with this man, Hassam, the Lebanese man who lost 15 members of his family. And, just to provide a little more context, Hassam, his family, he lost his father, mother, his brother in an Israeli airstrike. They destroyed his childhood home. He had to go to Lebanon to identify his parents' corpses, which were not identifiable except by their jewelry. And they tried to bury his parents, and they couldn't do it because the Israelis were airstriking right near the gravesite. And, it makes me think about all the international media and all the Democratic operatives that are right now concocting this narrative about how third parties, because I'm looking behind me and I see Trump, pulling away in key states like Pennsylvania. They're concocting this narrative very likely that third parties in the Palestine movement are the ones who tanked this election. And, to me, it's just like the idea they're going to say, oh, people like Hassam, they're insane.
Yeah, they tanked the election and you deserved it. I mean, the Democrats deserved it. Kamala went fucking right wing. She went to the right. She appealed to the right constantly. That was every word that came out of her mouth was, please vote for me, right wingers. And she ran on this bullshit unity ticket, which wasn't really about unity, because guess who it was silencing? It was silencing Arabs. It was silencing Palestinians. So it was unity of Zionists and right-wingers and centrists. That was her unity. Leftists and Arabs are Middle Easterners. Neither leftists or Middle Easterners were included in her unity bullshit.
Sensitive. They don't care about other issues. They don't care about the rest of America. They only care about this one narrow Arab issue, which it's not. But, you know, I think Hassam is a very sensitive person. I think he's very sensitive to all the suffering that he has seen in every single person, every member of his community. All the people here in Dearborn have the same story. They have either been affected directly or they know someone who's been affected directly by this genocide. So I want to know what you guys think about, you know, this whole narrative that will probably come down if Donald Trump wins tonight. What do you think will be said? And what would you say in response to these narratives that, you know, that progressives and pro-Palestine people have got Donald Trump elected?
Well, it's funny because one like tweet that's making the round.
I think what Cuba does with its religion is really clever because basically it puts its right-wing opposition group in the Catholic Church. So the Catholic Church in Cuba is like the main source of opposition to Cuba. And I think when you put all of your right-wing opposition in the church, people quickly see how fucking freakish and weird a lot of religious people are, and it turns people off on religion. Be right back.
Is actually from this woman who seemed, let's see, Rebecca Jones, and she has like 300,000 followers. It looks like she's some kind of whistleblower. So, and she seems smart, which is disappointing. So she tweeted out, "If you voted for Jill Stein, F you," and then she puts a screenshot of Virginia presidential election results. And as Brad Bloom, my producer, pointed out, the actual numbers don't even add up. Like the numbers that went to Jill Stein don't actually give Kamala Harris a victory. So she's like blinded by her rage, and it gets in the way of her intellect. And then someone else is like, "This is why you don't vote third parties." And I mean, a couple things to say to this. One is that this is kind of a great example because, as Brad pointed out, literally the math is off. It's not correct math. But also, the idea that you just take these people and they would have gone for the Democrat, like as if but for Jill Stein running, all of these Jill Stein voters would have voted for Harris. It's just not true. Like we know this. The majority of people who vote for Stein are people who never would have voted for the Democrat anyway. But you get Rhodes scholars like Rachel Maddow acting as if it would have made up that difference. And look, Rachel Maddow is many things, but she's not an idiot, so she's just a liar there, or she's in denial. I don't honestly know, but it's problematic. And then you get other people saying the same thing. This is why you don't vote green. Then there's like, I don't know, we should have a name for this. When you like, it's like a weird, like Rania mentioned it, like this weird like fantasy of where you inflict pain on vulnerable people. You're like, oh, I'm glad. I hope you enjoy getting deported now, like person who voted for Jill Stein, which is like you scratch a liberal and you get like a sadist sometimes. So yeah, we should, I think, make sure. And you know, obviously, it's like, well, you know, they could have just not run on genocide.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, before I give some of my points about Kay's point, which I think is a great point, I want to say, Katie, I know you got to run here at the top of the hour. You have powered through. You are sick, but you made it from 8 to 12. That's big. We really appreciate you joining us. Katie Halper, as a person, Katie Halper Show, good friends of us here at Breakthrough News. If you're watching on the Katie Halper Show live stream, we salute you. And as Katie, we really appreciate you joining and sticking with us despite being under the weather.
Thanks for everything. No, thanks for everything you guys do. And if there's any breaking news, what you think? How long do you think you guys are going to stream for?
Well, that's yet to be seen. I mean, I would like to try to hold out here, at least to see. I mean, you know, Georgia's at 93%, Pennsylvania's at 83%.
Wow.
Michigan is snail's pace. I don't know what we're going to know there tonight. Wisconsin, 76. So we might have a pretty good sense of the election if we stick here till 1. I'm not going to promise anyone out there in Viewerland, but yes, if you still see us on and want to come back,
I will do.
Text, you know the appropriate.
I do, with my hair curlers.
Yes, and shout out to Brad as well. Katie,
thanks, Brad, and thanks, Tyler, and thanks, Phantom Esfante for the clips, and thanks, Nathan, for the research. And I will see you guys if you're watching on my channel. Thanks so much. Love you. Subscribe, hit the like, and join Patreon at patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. That's patreon.com/The Katie Halper Show. And of course, support Breakthrough News. And also, I want to remind people that it's interesting because Brianna Joy Gray was on tonight. She and I both had the honor of having been fired by The Hill, of course. And when The Hill fired me because they refused to release that monologue I wrote, what did I do? I spoke about it with Rania Kalik and Breakthrough News, and we made the video there. So great reunion as always.
Perfect.
Okay,
Thank
bye
you so
guys.
much.
Thanks so much.
Okay, you had just asked just before we had to let Katie go, and she had answered the question, you know, the people being blamed. One thing I'll also note here, just sort of an aside, but I think an important issue, Missouri has voted in a ballot measure to raise the minimum wage to $13.75 there in Missouri. You know, we will... there's a lot that could be said about that in low-wage workers, and I'll come back to that. But to speak to your point, I think Katie made the point correctly. I mean, she was saying that, I think it was Rebecca Jones, was posted the screenshot from Virginia. Well, Kamala Harris won Virginia, so I don't even know what you're concerned about there. But I just took a look while Katie was talking in Pennsylvania, in Wisconsin.
Let's check in on Bosch. Okay. Is there no volume for some reason? Does he have it muted?
I will never forgive anti-electoralists. Again, the data that we have indicates that that's just not the driving force behind this. I'm considering the fact that basically everywhere in the United States has had a rightward shift. Like, everywhere. We're talking about shifts that are omnipresent, like completely spread across the board, you know? Like everywhere. Men being like a part of that, men are one of the demographics that are spread out pretty much everywhere in equal measure. I don't care, Vosh. I'm gonna be spiteful. They're either idiotic morons or evil. I hate them all. Okay. I'm not telling you to not be spiteful for their sake. I'm telling you to not be spiteful for your sake. You know, it's like forgiveness. You don't forgive to help the other person. You forgive to allow yourself to move past it. You know? Not that I'm saying you should forgive them. I'm saying that the spite will not serve you well.
I mean,
any advice on what to do?
It's easy for Vosh to not give a shit. I mean, he's a white dude. I'm a white dude also, but he's even more privileged than me because he's a millionaire. He's a multi-millionaire. And his ticket just got punched for another 4 years of making many more millions of dollars about how evil Trump is.
And in Georgia, all are the three where we have the most sort of information. I mean, it's also true in Michigan, but there's still less than 50%. But these are all Wisconsin 75%, Pennsylvania 83%, Georgia 93%. If all the votes that Jill Stein had went to Kamala Harris, she would still be losing, and she would actually still be losing by a lot. So the idea that it somehow was third parties, I mean, we've talked about it throughout the show. I mean, first and foremost, the sociological research on quote-unquote third party or multi-party voting is that most people who vote for third parties would not have voted, would have been in that roughly 40% of people who usually don't vote if it wouldn't have been for that. But then when we go to the specifics, I mean, you know, this is something that always came up in 2000 when the Ralph Nader thing happened. Like, he got 90,000 votes, but I think it was something like 250,000 registered Democrats voted for George W. Bush. So why aren't you mad at them as opposed to being mad at Ralph Nader? You know, there's also the question that was, I think, put out in the focus group that you all were able to do out there in Dearborn of people. One of the individuals said, I mean, even the idea that they own our vote ahead of time is like deeply offensive. And the idea that somehow it's the fault of the voter if the candidate cannot present a compelling program to the voter. A lot of people don't like that. But I think ultimately, from my point of view, Kay, the point that we'll have to make, and we'll have to see what the final vote totals are, but as it seems right now, it does not, in fact, seem that any of the progressive third-party candidates in any of the states anyone was concerned about got enough votes to actually make the difference in the election. Now, could that change over time? Yes, that could change. But as of right now, I think that's an important rejoinder. But even if it was to be the case, I think the most important question you have to ask here is the Democrats are concerned about losing. But the fact of the matter is the Democrats have, you know, the majority of their voters are supporting more progressive positions than them. So when you don't support the position of the majority of your voters, I don't know how you could be surprised that you can't drive voter enthusiasm. And that's ultimately what drives non-voters to the polls, because people they know are sort of pulling them there around issues that they care about. But, you know, we're not really seeing that front and center. I mean, you know, I don't know if this is actually true. Ralph Nader said this on Twitter, and so someone can fact check me. But he noted how Kamala was constantly campaigning with Liz Cheney, but basically never campaigned with Bernie Sanders. And yes, it is true she said she was open to a $15 an hour minimum wage, but, you know, one, that would have to pass Congress, and like that ain't happening. But let's just say that it could. She didn't make it a centerpiece of her campaign. I mean, she said we're going to bring down grocery prices, and she said it constantly and consistently. Now, of course, Trump said the same thing, but neither of them had much of a plan. I mean, Trump's plan was basically like, we're going to drill for oil and gas is going to go down, so all your prices are going to go down. I can go through a lot of reasons why that will not happen, including the fact that he wants to jack up tariffs. But, you know, Kamala Harris never actually explained what her plan was. And when you actually looked into it, you saw that it was very similar to the sort of price gouging laws that exist in a lot of states, which basically just means the FTC can take you to court and say that you're price gouging. So maybe like 2 or 3 years later, you'll have to pay some fine for price gouging. Now, some people...
Do I think Walz could have won this? I mean, maybe. I think he probably would have had a better chance than Harris did, but I mean, I think he's politically not all that different from Kamala. But I think he definitely would have done better. I don't know if he would have won, but he would have done better for sure.
Would say that the fear of that, maybe it'll help prices stay down or whatever. Obviously, if she was campaigning on just like price caps, like we're just like not going to let these people raise prices a certain amount, that would make a big difference. So you have all these points, and this is always the case with the Democrats, where they speak to the problem, but they don't speak to solutions that meet the scale of the problem. Kamala's saying, what, she's going to build 3 to 4 million houses or whatever that you need. We don't even, the affordable housing crisis is so big, we don't even know how many houses we need, but it's more than that. It's maybe more like 7 or 8 million. So at the end of the day, it's like people can see this. I mean, they may not know all the exact numbers.
All you have to fucking do is all the fucking hundreds of thousands of hotels in America, you turn those into apartments. I've thought about this for a while. I don't know if anyone else has thought about this, but it seems obvious. All these fucking hotels that have hundreds of empty rooms. When the Russian Revolution happened, that's what they did with mansions. They took the mansions from the rich, and families were given rooms in these mansions. The same thing should be done in America. Just take the mansions from rich people, take hotels that are empty all the time, all these endless empty rooms, and just turn them into apartments.
But they can see how, even though the Democrats are talking about the things they want to hear, and so is Trump to some degree, that the actual goods are not really being delivered in a serious way here, and it hurts them. And I think it hurts them because people stay home. And I think the fact that they thought that, Liz Cheney was an addition to the campaign is shocking to me. Whether or not you want to accept her support is one thing. I mean, whatever. Okay, you want to have as many people on your list. But I'm looking at Wisconsin, where they were campaigning together, Michigan, where they were campaigning together, doesn't really seem like it helped them whatsoever.
Yeah, one thing that amazes me is like the total unwillingness to like listen to their base or to even like try to win. Like just talking to someone outside about 2016 and how the Democrats basically rigged their primary against Bernie Sanders.
Yeah, there's tons of empty buildings being held for speculation purposes. Exactly, like there's all these incredibly fancy high rises in New York City that are just like empty. Yeah, it's depressing and incredibly dark. Incredibly dark.
And then did the same thing again in 2020 when, obviously Bernie Sanders was bringing huge crowds of young people of all different, nationalities, backgrounds, whatever, men, women, everyone, bringing all these small donors. And it's like, clearly, if you wanted to win the election or defeat Trump or whatever they were saying, like, this was your candidate. And, they rigged the election in the primary in 2016. In 2020, I will never forget how poorly Joe Biden was doing in the primary. And then they engineered this whole thing on Super Tuesday where all the other candidates would drop out. But, it seems like, again, they have screwed up again. Obviously we don't know what's going to happen, but it looks right now like the momentum is going heavily for Trump. Eugene, you could probably tell me about some obscure county that I've overlooked, but it looks like it's going that way. And it's just, I really do wonder if the Democrats will take a hard look in the mirror this election. Obviously their corporate donors are a huge obstacle in that, but I don't know. I mean, I really do think, or maybe I just hope that people will take this as a very sobering lesson. And all these people who I think, I don't fault them. I don't want Trump to win. I think there are many people who are voting against him or voting for Kamala Harris out of a legitimate fear about what Trump will bring. But I hope all these people watch very carefully what the Democrats do in the next, few months, few years, see how they respond to their failure, and, learn a lesson or two about where their values lie. And I don't know if you think that's what'll happen or not, but I'm really skeptical that they'll learn lessons from this.
Yeah, I think you're right, Kay. I think they won't learn any lessons. I think that, in a way it's because they know what they're doing, right? I think this is one of the things we have to understand structurally about politics is, the further to the right you move, it's basically fine for the big billionaire donors who run politics because it just means you're moving in a more and more pro-capitalist direction, right? So I think from that perspective, it's like you can live with the more and more right-wing Tea Party, Trumper type people, even if you don't like them if you're a billionaire. But the more you move in that direction into the left, the more you're talking about curtailing the rights of capital and putting the rights of the working class ahead of that. And so obviously the people with the billions of dollars who, are the most affected by that do not actually want to see those changes. So they have actually installed within the Democratic Party a leadership that is just 110%, in a position where they are designed to block a move from a certain perspective. They make sure that there are clear red lines around particular economic issues, as it were. They make sure that there isn't big change and transformative change in the economy and foreign policy and so on and so forth in a more progressive direction. So it's like they know they can lose with these policies, but they don't want to change them because to change them means they got to jump off the gravy train of the big donations, the revolving doors, all the perks and things that come along with it. The whole reason why people want to be involved in establishment.
Yeah, I mean, it's really not hard to solve homelessness. It's just not hard. The Soviet Union did it. The Soviet Union had no homelessness. I don't know about China, but Cuba also has no homelessness. Now, are all the houses in Cuba, are they these incredibly nice places to live? No. But simply having a house is far, far better than living on the street. And I know this because I've actually watched people talk about living on the street and homelessness. And it is horrific. It is absolutely unspeakably awful to be homeless. So even living in an absolute shithole is way better because you have a place that you can relax, sleep. All of these things are very valuable. And you don't have these things when you're homeless. So yeah, in Cuba, the houses may not be mansions, but people have houses, and that's a very meaningful thing for being able to succeed in life. And it's just not hard to do. It's really not hard to do. It's just that it's not profitable to house people. Does China have no homeless people? And Vietnam? Or Laos? What's the source that the DPRK has no homelessness? So is Trump actually going to win the popular vote? Because that would be fucking hilarious.
Politics is that it's a way to get ahead and to get rich. All of that is not going to happen if you start to really stick to your guns as it concerns, more progressive policies, especially when it comes to the economy, especially when it comes to foreign policy. So I think that is a big part of where it's at, is the very fact that there is such a blockage because American politics moves from the center right. And it's like whatever the billionaires and the ultra rich want, that's what sets the agenda. And it can always expand more to the right than it can to the left. And it only really expands to the left in the context of, COVID-19 in 2020, this huge pandemic. That was like a war. You know what I'm saying? You think about the images, people lining up in front of grocery stores to get rationed food, right? Like they say that's supposed to be, quote unquote, third world country type realities. And here you are in the United States of America. Deep psychological effect. Obviously the uprisings against racism and the uprisings that had preceded what had happened in 2020 that had gone on. I mean, 2020, of course, a moment of great turmoil. You have this huge mass uprising of people, mass anger at the mishandling of this pandemic. So yeah, okay, of course, they're willing to move a little bit more to the left, but at the end of the day, it's something that can open more to the right. To your point, Kay, I don't know if there's that many obscure counties left that I could even call on. You look at Georgia, which is like pretty close.
Nah, I don't think Trump's going to win the popular vote because California is only 44% counted. I think California will probably put Kamala in the lead for the popular vote. But I might be wrong.
A lot of votes left to come in. Savannah, which is a big Democratic area, kind of with some to come in. But by and large, it's looking pretty good for Trump, who with 95% of the votes in is about 2 points ahead, a little bit less than that, but pretty firmly ahead. And it does seem to be trending in a number of states in a similar direction. Wisconsin, it looks like the Democrats are up in Minnesota. Shouldn't be a problem with them there. Michigan, we've now gone over 50% of votes, and Trump is ahead by 6 percentage points with 51% of votes in Michigan. So that's not a great sign, but not the end of the world. Trump is basically tied still in Arizona with 53% in. So it's not trending great. Pennsylvania, let's see here, 87% in. Trump is up by about 3 points. And when you look at what's out, it's not necessarily, I'm just kind of randomly looking at the map. Certainly heavily Democratic areas in the Philly region seem to be a little less out than many heavy Republican areas. They are, of course, more populated areas, so could still switch around for Harris there. But anyway, long story short, Kay, to your point, yes, it certainly does look like Trump has a lot of strength here and that the blame game is already starting.
Yeah, Pennsylvania looks pretty likely to go to Trump. Yeah, and these fucking freaks can't blame it on fucking third parties because Kamala's getting beaten so bad that the third parties aren't playing a role. Maybe it'll play a role here, actually. But it doesn't matter anyways, because it looks like Trump is going to pretty comfortably win at this rate.
It's only going to intensify.
Yeah, I have a question for you, Eugene, actually. You know, I don't know if you covered this earlier in the show. I hopped off when Tara Houska came on, but I do wonder, you know, there was all this talk about Project 2025, and obviously, you know, the Democrats were saying this is the future of the Trump agenda, and then many people on Trump's team, you know, people like Elon Musk and all these people were playing down. They were saying, oh, this is like a Democratic hoax. They're just, you know, using this to whip people up into a frenzy. But what is your read right now? I mean, obviously, it might be a little hard to say this far out, but what is your read on like how much like Trump will, you know, try to you know, accomplish all these sort of hard right things, or do you think he'll just try to preserve his legacy and sort of be palatable in the history books?
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Kay. I mean, I think the first thing will, of course, depend on, you know, what takes place with the House and the Senate, which will sort of speak to what Trump will be able to get through. I mean, right now, it does look like the Republicans are going to take the Senate.
That's a good point. It will depend on, like, if Trump, how much power Trump has in the House and Senate. That's a very good point.
The House looks a little bit more like a mixed bag, but it certainly looks like the Republicans might hold there in the House. So if there is non-divided government, the Republicans control the presidency, the Senate, and the House.
Anyways, I really want to keep going. I really wish I could keep going, but I accidentally took my sleep medication. And I also have work tomorrow anyways, so I should go to sleep. Oh, my coworkers are going to be so fucking annoying. Oh my god. Well, anyways. Yeah, I'm passing out. I guess this was kind of deserved for Kamala. I mean, that's just the truth of it. So we'll see how things are tomorrow, but it's looking like an almost certainly a Trump victory. I'd say 95%. So I guess keep watching Breakthrough News or whatever you feel is best, and best of luck. Last Vouch check-in? No. No, I can't. I'm too tired. I need to go to sleep. Check yourself. Alright, anyways. Please donate if you like. Donation links are in the description, or also on my Patreon. Your support is appreciated, and yes. Good night. Sleep well.